This kid is the biggest genius born in the last 300 years. Even when he was born, Dale didn't cry. His mother then used all her strength, and only then did the baby cry. When he was 8 years old, he was already a prodigy above geniuses. Using multiple elemental spells in combat was as natural as breathing. His potential was so great that even at just 10 years old, his father put him on the front lines of combat between kingdoms. With his son's power, enemies were crushed like cockroaches. Stories were already being told about him, the terror of enemies. One day, a young noblewoman from another kingdom named Charlotte Orlhart was brought to House Saxon. Led by Duke Alan Saxon, the greatest necromancer and dark mage on the continent and leader of the Black Tower. Arriving at that castle asking for shelter as a servant was a huge humiliation for someone who grew up proud of her warrior noble bloodline. She would never bow down to a kid that age. Furious, the girl challenged the boy to a duel. She would prove she was superior to everyone with her sword. She carried the lineage of the divine blade after all. Charlotte tried every way she could, but even with Dale using only a sword and nothing else, she wasn't capable of beating him, and she was even using aura to attack. When she was defeated for the first time, the girl cried, not knowing how she would avenge her family. Dale then said heavy words, "You lack strength and power, but you don't lack talent. If you swear to follow me and serve House Saxon, I promise to make you the most powerful and support your revenge against whoever destroyed your kingdom." Will the girl accept? And is Dale capable of that? Let's go back to the beginning. The hero's name is Han Sung. He orders his companion to get up so they can keep pushing forward. The soldier confirms and gets to his feet while Han Sung loads his weapon. In this world, humanity has been at war against monsters for decades. After endless deadly battles, only a handful of humans have survived. But now Han Sung's goal is right in front of him. Suddenly, a magic circle appears beneath his feet. His eyes go wide. He has no idea what it is. Before he can react, the circle starts pulling him in, and Han Sung vanishes as if by magic. As he feels his body moving in a strange way, a voice echoes commanding him to answer the call. Golden lines wrap around his neck. When his vision steadies, the young man finds himself trapped in an unknown place, surrounded by several hooded figures watching him in silence. Looking down at his own arms, he notices glowing shackles he has never seen before. An elderly man approaches, lowers his hood, and welcomes the hero from another world. Even acknowledging that it's a sudden request, the old man says they want the young man to defeat the Demon King and save this world. Desperate, Han Sung demands to know where he is and shouts that he should be in Korea, in the middle of a battle. To silence him, the old man casts a spell in his direction. The young man screams as if in excruciating pain, while the man explains that the binding oath has been activated, and that the magic won't hurt him if he stays calm. With eyes full of tears and his body burning with pain, Han Sung doesn't have many choices. The bald old man picks up a sword and repeats the request: defeat the Demon King, save the Empire. He tosses the weapon toward the young man, and finishes by saying that if Han Sung succeeds, he will be sent back to his world. The hooded figures watch with gleaming eyes, waiting for his answer. Han Sung reads the situation, weighs his next moves, and decides that the best choice is to accept. That was how Han Sung was summoned to a completely different world, to keep fighting as the hero from another world of an empire. The young man worked without rest, carrying heavy burdens and taking part in countless expeditions, always cutting his enemies down. 3 years passed, then 5, then 10. His entire youth was sacrificed in pursuit of the goal of defeating the Demon King of Valror. But now, after completing the main mission, the bald old man announces that he has a new mission to hand over. Han Sung, irritated, says that wasn't what the man promised. The old man replies that saving the empire doesn't end with the Demon King's death. There are still those who oppose unification, and all of them must be eliminated. A wanted poster is pinned to the wall. On it, the face of Badal, a man from the Night Kingdom of Teutonia, marked for elimination. With a sarcastic smile, the old man asks the hero to help them just a little bit more, and a dog with a shock collar has no choice. Han Sung heads into yet another battle, wondering when all of this will ever end. After a brief exchange of blows, he manages to land a sword strike on Badal. Wounded, the man tells his enemy that he is very foolish. Han Sung replies that he had no choice, and, looking down, says he is sorry for what he did. With a serious look, Badal asks Han Sung not to apologize, because soon he will be discarded too. After completing the mission, the protagonist believes he can finally go home. But before he can celebrate, the threads binding his neck are yanked with force. A bearded man approaches, congratulating the hero from another world while pulling the threads and driving his sword into his stomach. Han Sung recognizes that man. It's Count Brandenburg. The Count says the young man served very well as the Empire's loyal hunting dog, and that, as Grand General and Sacred Knight, he acknowledges his efforts. It's at that moment the truth sinks in. Perhaps it was never their intention to send him back. As he delivers more strikes, the Count remarks that they didn't even need to do any of this, since a hunting dog only knows how to bite. Han Sung collapses unconscious to the ground. Brandenburg says his farewell. Losing consciousness, the young man thinks that he had already seen this coming. His final thoughts are a promise. He will never forget this humiliation, and he will make this empire pay with its total annihilation. Sometime later, on that same night, one life closed its eyes for the last time, while another opened them for the first. A duchess approaches her own newborn baby, but the baby starts to think, and realizes he has never seen that young woman before. With some effort, the memories begin to come back. The man beside her was the finest necromancer and dark mage on the continent, the renowned Duke Saxon. So that place had to be the Empire's forbidden magic headquarters, Necropolis, where the Black Tower stands. Before dying, Han Sung had hidden a resurrection stone among his belongings, but the body he would be reborn into was completely random. He got lucky. He was born as the firstborn son of Saxon, one of the most important nobles in the Empire. This time, the young man was truly born with a silver spoon. His new goal was set: grow up, become a necromancer, and tear apart every single man who had betrayed him. Concerned, Saxon notices that his son isn't crying. A woman approaches and says the little boy seems fine, just very quiet. Han Sung, of course, is not a real child. He won't cry that easily. The woman looks closely and says his breathing is stable, so there's nothing to worry about. The Duke wonders whether a child not crying at birth could be a bad omen. The woman replies that the best way to handle that is to give the baby a few light pats on the bottom. The situation leaves Han Sung annoyed and humiliated. Even so, the baby doesn't cry, which leads the parents to conclude that the little boy takes after Saxon's strength. With a graceful smile, the mother asks to hold him. Han Sung mentally prepares himself for another round of humiliation, but instead of hitting him, she begins to stroke him gently. The moment the young woman's warm, gentle hand touched his skin, something stirred inside him. Han Sung tried to remember the last time he had felt something like this. Not pain, not battle wounds, tenderness, love. The young mother's hand radiated something he hadn't felt in years, maybe decades. In that moment, Han Sung couldn't hold back. He cried, truly, the way a baby is supposed to cry. The day begins with the noble couple getting out of bed. Saxon remarks, amazed at how fast time flies. It's already been 8 years since Dale was born. The woman asks if the boy is still buried in books, noting that habit goes back to when he was 4. Smiling, the Duke observes that the boy has started showing interest in magic, but the blonde shifts the tone of the conversation. She turns her husband's face toward her and asks if he remembers the promise he made, that Alan would not teach necromancy to their son. Saxon confirms it, and she breathes a sigh of relief. Then he suggests the two of them should focus more on the boy's birthday present the following day. A loud noise cuts the conversation short. The maid rushes into the room, calling for the master. Young Dale is in the study. The couple runs there and finds the boy on the floor, surrounded by a magic circle emanating from the pages of a book. His mother approaches with concern, asking if he got hurt. Dale assures her he didn't. Saxon focuses and senses a charge of mana in the air, and realizes, impressed, that his son has already managed to release mana within his own body at 8 years old. Dale starts scrambling for a quick explanation, afraid they might suspect something, but the Duke doesn't look suspicious. He looks proud. Ruffling the boy's hair, he says it's exactly what he expected from his son, and only regrets not being able to teach him necromancy. His mother asks with a smile for Dale to head back to his room while the servants clean up the mess. As the boy leaves, Alan calls his wife by name. He just had an idea for their son's present. Sometime later, Dale's birthday banquet brings together all the nobles from the Black Duke's territory. The guests are eager to see the birthday boy, but in the hall on the second floor, far from the party, the protagonist is lost in thought. He finds it exhausting knowing that all those people are there just because of him. After a lifetime of being treated with indifference, being fawned over like this feels genuinely strange. On top of that, he's still carrying the worry from the accident a few days ago. His mana had gone out of control from just the remnants of his time as a hero. There's no denying that his current body has a natural talent for necromancy. The right move would be to convince his father to teach him. Dale thinks he might as well ask for that as his birthday present instead of anything material. His mother appears, apologizing for the delay. She's dressed in stunning attire and accompanied by a hooded figure. Dale notices the strange presence and asks who it is. It's an elder from the Blue Magic Tower, Lady Sephia, the wise elf, a master of water magic. Elena explains that she will be Dale's Dale's new teacher. The birthday present from his parents is Sephia herself as his master. The message between the lines is clear. His mother wants her son to learn water magic, focused on defense and interruption. Dark magic is out of the question. With a friendly smile, Lady Sephia asks to speak with Dale alone. The two step away, and she explains that his parents asked her to teach only water magic, but that she knows very well the boy has an interest in another kind of magic. It's only natural that the Black Duke's son would want to learn necromancy, but there's a condition known throughout the entire empire. In the past, Elena was deeply wary of Alan's dark reputation. To win her over, he promised that his shadowy legacy would not be passed on to the next generation. On the very day of their wedding, all the elders of the Black Tower wore white instead of their black robes. The marriage was built on that oath. Convincing Lady Elena will not be a simple task. Sephia smiles and asks if the boy accepts her teachings. Dale, in turn, asks if she isn't wary of dark magic, given that she's an elf who values the laws of nature. The question draws a laugh out of her. Sephia uses as an example the divine power of priests who resurrect the dead, something that also goes against the will of nature. To her, necromancy is the same thing. Dale realizes that Sephia is very different from Orthodox elves. She might turn out to be a far better teacher than he had imagined. Eager to get started, she mentions that she heard about the fragment of a mana circle the boy formed a few days ago. The initial goal will be to expand that fragment and form the first complete circle, something essential for any kind of magic. She asks Dale to place his hand over his heart and concentrate. A world filled with mana is unlike anything he had known before. Unless you're an ancient being like a dragon, handling raw mana is practically impossible. To filter and process that energy, you need a mana circle spinning steadily around the heart. Dale begins mentally tracing the path the mana takes toward his chest, following his teacher's every word. Sephia warns that they'll start slowly. Normally, the process takes about a month, so there's no rush. Dale then opens his palm and shows an energy he managed to conjure. He asks if he did it. She freezes. A child shouldn't be able to form a circle in a matter of minutes. Sephia asks if he can release magical power through the circle. Dale says he'll try. In his past life, he could only use combat magic through magical engravings spread across his body. But his current body accepts mana naturally, which may allow him to learn not just water magic, but other types as well. The circle takes shape as the boy's concentration grows. A sharp projectile forms between Dale's hands. Sephia watches in disbelief. Normally, the shape of the magic collapses during the process of condensing and releasing mana. But the boy points the projectile at a tree and launches it. The trunk explodes into pieces. The strike was sharp and hard enough to cut clean through the entire wood. That's not the level of precision you'd expect from an 8-year-old. Eyes wide, Sephia looks at her student. Dale waves with a smile and she thinks, unable to hide her expression, just what kind of kid is this? Sephia keeps staring at the remains of the tree, still processing what she just witnessed. It was basic magic, but the perfection with which the boy executed it was anything but basic. Dale, for his part, looks worried, as if he did something wrong. The teacher turns to him with a calm smile to put him at ease. What she doesn't say out loud is what she's thinking: rotation, acceleration, and compression, the three formulas known as the gold standard of magic. For an 8-year-old child to execute all three with that level of precision, there has to be something very different about this boy. Sephia waves it off and says it's nothing, but adds that she finally understands why the Black Archmage had so many regrets. Later, Sephia sits at a table with Saxon and Alan. Saxon is clearly unhappy with her decision and asks why she can't keep teaching Dale. The elf calmly explains. The moment the young master reached the first circle, he executed an attack spell with perfect form, something you wouldn't expect from a child his age. The power contained all three basic formulas. The boy's talent is undeniable. The Duke frowns. Even as an elder of the Blue Magic Tower, she can't teach him? Sephia takes a sip of tea before answering. That's not it. If anything, it only made her want to teach him more. Alan, confused, asks why she's refusing then. The elf answers plainly, because the young master already has something he wants to learn, and that something is the Black Archmage's dark magic. She knows the book, and she knows the promise Saxon made to his wife, but none of that gives anyone the right to interfere with the future of a child as talented as Dale. On the other side of the door, Dale himself is listening to everything, not catching all the details, but almost certain they're talking about him. He never imagined his first spell would have this much of an impact on Sephia. The conclusion is simple. From now on, he needs to be more careful about what he shows. Someone calls his name and breaks his train of thought. Dale smiles before he even turns around. It's his Uncle Helmet. The man asks what his nephew nephew is doing there. Dale ignores the question and asks how he's been. Helmut laughs and pulls him into a hug, saying he's been doing his duty protecting the dukedom, taking down horrible monsters across the region. Dale asks excitedly if he was in the dungeons, but the smile doesn't hide the worry in his eyes. In this world, dungeons and monsters are one of the biggest problems facing any territory. Since the era of the Demon King, the damage caused has been beyond measure, and it's the duty of knights to subjugate the dungeons he left behind. The Saxon dukedom, however, is in one of the worst situations, and the reason is Dale himself. In his past life, he was the one who killed the Demon King. As a reward, the Duke of Saxon received new imperial lands, along with the dirty work of clearing out the monsters infesting them. Dale asks his uncle to be careful and not get hurt. The conversation is cut short by the Duke, who remarks that Helmut worked especially hard this time. Then Elena appears, surprised to find everyone gathered. When she sees Dale, she smiles and congratulates him. She was happy to hear her son had reached the first magic circle. Alan also congratulates the boy and tells him that if he wants anything, he just has to ask. Dale puts a hand to his chin. Asking to learn necromancy is out of the question. What would an 8-year-old child ask for? Then he shouts that he wants a little sister. The couple freezes. Helmut can barely hold back his laughter, and one of his soldiers whispers that the captain really shouldn't be laughing in such an awkward situation. The Duke, expression still locked in place, says he'll try to make that happen. Later, lying in bed, Dale thinks he needs to act pure and innocent, behave in line with the age he appears to be. He's especially tired, probably from the effort of using magic. Sleep comes fast, and with it, the nightmares. He sees Count Brandenburg. The man remarks, in that cold voice of his, that it's been a while since they last met, and then grabs him by the hair. He says people are strange, that they grow weak so easily, that Dale now has good parents, a comfortable home, a full stomach, that he shouldn't be thinking about revenge, and that soon the Empire will find him and make him disappear from this world completely. Dale jolts awake. There's a strange pain in his chest. His heart is pounding too hard, like it might burst. Mana reflux. He's heard of it before. As he presses his hand against his chest, a dull anger toward the Imperialists rises inside him. People like that never give up. He goes looking for fresh air, thinking it might help, but the more he walks, the worse the pain gets. Sophia finds him along the way and immediately understands what's happening. She identifies the mana reflux, something to be expected in a child with that much talent, and places her hand on his chest to help him. As she works to ease the pain, she thinks that if this child falls into malice, he could become something irreversible. Like magic, the reflux stops. Sophia gets the boy's attention. The essence of magic is a mirror of the heart. The same spell changes depending on who casts it, and Dale's talent is far too dangerous to be left without guidance. That's why she believes she's the only one who can help him. Then she hands him a book on necromancy. With a smile, she says that their meeting must have been the work of fate, and she wishes the boy a happy birthday. Dale hugs her with everything he has. A few days later, master and student are gathered on a plain to the north, watching a small rabbit ahead of them. Sophia tells Dale to imagine he's hunting with his father. The boy starts gathering mana. The rabbit senses it's being watched, but the magic circle has already formed in the young man's palm. The strike fires like a sharp projectile and hits the creature with a loud crack. Sophia watches the boy's fingers. They don't tremble, not even after taking a life. The teacher then explains that the same magic can take infinitely different forms depending on who uses it, and asks if he knows why. Without waiting for an answer, she explains it herself. Magic is a mirror of the heart. Mana particles materialize whatever resides in the caster's mind. Even spell names, like Firewall, exist only to help the imagination form an image. Dale listens carefully, slightly uneasy. Sophia continues. The red tower values order through power. The blue tower through harmony. The spells of each tower reflect those philosophies. Each one's magic system is built on the ideology they follow. She watches her student's face as she speaks. He's focused, taking in every word. Even so, she knows it's too early for him to absorb all of this. Then she moves on to practice. The most basic form of necromancy is zombification. The dead rabbit begins to be wrapped in a purple energy. The spell uses mana to reanimate the body and lets the caster control it through mana threads, like a ventriloquist's puppet, connected to the target's head, spine, and knees. The boy is doing well. Sophia tells him he can move on to the next step. Dale focuses hard, conjuring an ice armor. As he places his hand on the ground, a powerful wave spreads out and ice takes over the area. The rabbit rises, covered in the armor. The teacher asks him to test its resistance. Dale opens his eyes, imagining what her attack might do. Sophia casts the spell. The rabbit is thrown into the air, but part of the armor stays intact on the animal's body. Dale shouts excitedly that it worked, that he managed to block her attack. Satisfied, Sophia praises her student. Then she notices he wants to say something and asks if he has a request. Dale places his hand over his heart, looks his teacher in the eye, and asks her to help him master basic water magic as well. Sophia smiles calmly, but she quickly answers that she won't do that. She explains that what he did that day was already a basic form of water magic, and that all magic of that type requires a high level of dimensional understanding, proportionally more complex than the rest. For a beginner, any magic is already draining on its own. Becoming a dual mage is extremely difficult for someone his age. With a calm smile, she remarks that Dale might be aiming a little too high. The boy opens his eyes. Even after everything he showed, it still wasn't enough for her to believe in him. He looks down and murmurs that they should find a way to grow together. Sophia tries to explain herself, but decides to end the lesson there. That same night, Dale goes to the office to get books and starts studying on his own. He thinks that if he can prove he's capable, the teacher will have no choice but to teach him. The night passes quickly. The next day, he shows up with dark circles under his eyes and an exhausted look. Sophia tells him not to overdo it. He agrees, and immediately starts conjuring a purple magic circle in his palm. In moments, he revives another rabbit, also wrapped in ice armor. The teacher realizes he has completely mastered both techniques, but then something surprises her. The armor begins to crack and explodes. Sophia stands still, shocked. The rabbit, however, is still there. The magic hasn't broken. The animal's belly starts to swell. A purple sphere appears in its abdomen. The small body convulses, as if something is happening from within. Then it explodes into pieces. Shards of ice fly through the air and strike the defensive field she had created. Sophia stares at her student, still visibly stunned. Dale calmly explains, "It's a combination of corpse explosion and ice explosion, a fusion of water magic and dark magic." Then he looks directly at his teacher and asks if, with that, he can be considered a dual mage. The training ground is covered in fragments left behind by the explosion. Sophia stands there wide-eyed. She had never seen an attack like that before. The combination of the ice armor and the cadaveric explosion produced an area of damage far greater than either technique on its own, and the shards of ice and bone behave like blades. It's a technique made to kill, the kind of thing you only learn from living on a battlefield. The elf wonders silently what the inner world of that child must be like. Dale watches her, suspicious, still trying to read his teacher's expression. That's when Uncle Helmet appears on horseback, waving at the two of them. He explains that this time there was only a small group of monsters in the dungeon, practically a warm-up for the Black Cavalry. The Black Cavalry is the main fighting force of House Sackstein, a unit that dominates the battlefield with aura-wrapped lances, led by the skilled Sir Helmet, one of the few to earn the title of one of the continent's 7 swords. Dale smiles and asks his uncle if he forgot his promise to train him. Helmet laughs and says the boy can come by whenever he wants, but warns that it's very cold and tells him to head home soon. Sophia agrees, and the three of them wrap up the day. That night, the elven teacher drinks tea while talking with Elena and the Duke. She explains that young Master Dale has mastered the first circle of necromancy, as well as water magic. The Duke is stunned. The agreement had been different. The teacher was only supposed to teach the water element. Sophia acknowledges that, but stands her ground. As a teacher, she taught what the child wanted to learn. Water magic wasn't the only thing the boy was after. Elena says she understands her son's desire, but asks the elf to keep teaching water magic. Sophia agrees, and says she hopes to get along well with everyone there going forward. Before leaving, though, she stops at the door and looks back. She apologizes to Elena for making her break her oath with the Black Duke. Elena replies that she knows the boy is no ordinary child. Being a dual mage at only 8 years old is something remarkable. The Duke's expression shifts. He lowers his head and speaks in a quiet voice. As a lord, he would like to teach necromancy to his own son, so the boy would have enough strength to handle the duties of an heir. As a mage, he would like to have a powerful disciple. And as a father, he wants to pass on what is his to his son. Alan asks his wife for forgiveness. Elena embraces him. She says that necromancy is still seen as taboo. Many consider it a magic tied to death, and that's why she tried to stop the situation. But she asks her husband to train their son until the boy becomes strong enough to silence everyone who thinks that way. The couple share a tender moment, and the mood in the room grows lighter. With a smile, the Duke says he'll bet everything he has on raising his son to greatness. And so begins our protagonist's first official day of necromancy training. Standing before his son, Duke Alan says he is disappointed. He heard that Dale had been reanimating things things without even understanding what he was doing. The boy doesn't answer, but thinks to himself that it was his own teacher who taught him, so there wasn't much he could do about it. The two of them are in the Black Duke's magic workshop in the castle's basement. Alan warns that, as long as Dale is his disciple, he must not use such mediocre necromancy. The training begins with memorizing the bone and muscle structure of every living creature. Surrounded by countless books, Dale accepts the lesson. After days of study, he realizes that those texts hold knowledge that, in his previous life, only doctors would have had access to. When he finishes memorizing every detail, the Duke says they can finally move on to a real lesson. Then Dale's eyes go wide. On the table lies the corpse of a goblin. Alan notices his son's reaction and remarks that a truly skilled sorcerer can transform the body of a common soldier into a real death knight. Then he asks how the boy plans to control it. Dale extends his hand and starts to sweat. Unlike a rabbit, a bipedal body is far more complex. There are many points where the mana threads need to be connected. With difficulty, he tries to move the goblin's hand, but it's like controlling an incredibly complicated puppet. Worse still, he had accelerated rigor mortis to increase its defense, and now the body is so stiff it can barely move. He doesn't know what to do. Then his father places a hand on his shoulder. He says that accelerating rigor mortis to increase resistance was in fact a good idea, but that it also limits the body's movement. With his eyes gleaming, he tells Dale to watch closely. A purple energy begins to radiate from the Duke. The goblin rises all at once, controlled with perfect precision. Then the creature's ribcage begins to change. The structure that once served to protect the internal organs takes on a different purpose. For the dead, there is no reason to protect them. Everything can become an extension of the attack. Alan explains that understanding the target's structure allows you to shape it according to your own will. Dale watches it all completely in awe. The Duke ends the spell and says that this is the foundation of dark magic. Dale calls out to his father and asks him to explain the philosophy of the Black Tower. The sudden curiosity from his son makes Alan smile. Raising his hand, he begins to speak. Truth always exists within death. That is why every necromancer must understand it completely, to reach that truth and grasp the weight of life. The words stir something in Dale. Memories of a past life, when he was a knight who had to take the lives of many people. His sword, stained from battle, raised again and again to claim one more life, each strike carrying pain and suffering. Dale loses himself in those thoughts. His father notices and asks if he's all right. The boy goes pale. The image of a soldier sheathing his weapon after killing someone won't leave his mind. Even so, he answers that he's fine. As Dale's magical aptitude grew, rumors began spreading across the empire. People were saying that Duke Saxon was teaching his son dark magic. The breakdown of the couple's pact only made things worse, sending shockwaves through the entire nobility. From that point on, the empire's eyes followed the boy closely, without rest. But Dale never stopped training. Under his Uncle Helmut's guidance, he practiced sword techniques relentlessly. The knight didn't go easy on him, and the boy met every strike with the same intensity. Helmut watched with a smile on his face. With each exchange, his nephew's reflexes were getting sharper. Suddenly, Helmut raised his sword and delivered a more serious blow. Dale barely dodged it, and without hesitating, countered with enough precision to knock the weapon right out of his uncle's hands. The sword flew through the air and planted itself in the ground between them. Helmut laughed, genuinely impressed. He said that had been incredible. Dale, however, replied that his uncle had gone easy on him. A knight of that level wouldn't drop his sword so easily. Helmut explained that he had been using practical fencing, and that in a real situation, an ordinary person would have died from that strike. He added that the boy's skill was so exceptional it was almost a shame he had chosen the path of magic. Still, he pointed out that mages usually rely on guards and defensive magic. There was no need to push himself that hard. Overdoing it could end up causing injuries. Dale replied that he had a reason for dedicating himself that way. It would be pathetic if the Duke's son had to depend on nothing but guards and magic shields. Helmut lit up immediately. He placed his hand on the boy's head and said it was a splendid answer, and that he would give anything to have a son like him. The conversation was cut short by Elena's arrival. She walked over, commenting that the two of them looked like they were having fun, and explained that she had come to see how hard her son was working. But she also had some news to share. She asked if Dale remembered a birthday present he had once asked for. The boy frowned, trying to remember. Then the memory came back. On his birthday, he had asked for a little sister. Dale's eyes went wide. Elena placed her hand on her stomach and said he would need to take good care of his little sister too. Eyes shining, the boy clasped his hands together and answered that he absolutely would. 10 months later, the family was gathered together with a new member. Dale gently poked the baby's tiny face, saying he still couldn't believe she was his sister. Elena smiled and asked if he would like to hold her, saying it wasn't as hard as it looked. As he took her in his arms, the boy studied every detail of the small face with complete attention. Elena mentioned that the baby had cried a lot when her father held her, laughter, but had stayed perfectly calm in her older brother's arms. Someone asked what Dale thought. He answered that she was so light, yet at the same time felt incredibly heavy. The Duke closed his eyes and smiled. He said that was the weight of a life. Then he leaned down to look his son in the eye and asked Dale never to forget that. Elena stepped in, reminding them that Lady Cephia was probably already waiting for the boy. Cephia explained that today's lesson would be a practical one. Dale was excited by the idea, and the teacher told him not to hold back. He could use everything he had. The boy began forming a magic circle in the palm of his hand. The elf smiled, curious to see how much her student had grown. Dale created an ice projectile and launched it toward his teacher. For an opening attack, though, the movement was slow. Cephia blocked everything with ease and, with a sarcastic smile, asked how a student dared go easy on his own master. Dale stared at her with a serious expression. Cephia launched her counterattack and ordered him to raise a barrier. The boy's eyes went wide. He couldn't react in time. The strike hit his arm with full force. Thanks to his speed, he managed to conjure an ice armor at the moment of impact, which prevented a serious injury. Right after, the armor began to shatter. The master observed, acknowledging the feat. She told him to try again. Dale began building a molecular combination based on the ice wall formula. Around him, a crystalline barrier took shape. Cephia was surprised by the size of the structure. The boy had reinforced the ice's molecular bonds, drastically increasing its density and making it as tough as steel. The teacher stepped closer and placed her hand on the frozen surface, questioning why he had conjured that defense at that moment. She wondered if the boy needed time to recover from the last attack. Then a sound echoed nearby, like the beginning of a glacial explosion. Inside the barrier, Dale was completely focused. The next instant, he called for the detonation. An intense light began forming within the structure. Cephia's eyes went wide. Before she could react, shards of ice began to form and were launched in her direction like a devastating attack. The ice barrier shattered, and Dale knew he had pulled it off. The technique he had used was a brutal combination. An ice barrier reinforced multiple times with a built-in explosive effect, practically a grenade. This time, he was sure his master wouldn't be able to dodge it easily. Then something stopped him cold. Cephia was right in front of him, her body riddled with holes. Dale took a second to process the scene. The real Cephia was standing just behind her, completely unharmed. What he had hit was nothing but an illusion. With a snap of her fingers, she dissolved the copy and smiled, saying it was an impressive skill. She admitted she never would have expected something like that from a first circle mage. Under different circumstances, she might have actually gotten hurt. Dale lowered his head and said that had never been his intention. Cephia said she knew that. Even so, she was very proud. She crouched down to look the boy in the eyes and told him it meant he trusted her enough to show her everything he had, and that, as his master, she couldn't be happier. She also remarked on how impressive it was to have crafted such a powerful formula. Dale replied that all of it was thanks to her teachings. Cephia smiled, watching the disciple who was growing so well right before her eyes. Sometime later, Cephia was in a room talking with Duke Alan. He asked what had happened to her jaw. The teacher explained she had gotten hurt during a lesson with her student. Alan commented with a smile that they always seemed to cause trouble for her. The elf replied that teaching her disciple could never be a problem. On the contrary, it was something that brought her joy. Taking the moment, Alan said he had a request. They had received word that an orc horde had crossed the mountain and invaded the territory. It wasn't something a small cavalry unit could handle. Cephia immediately understood what that meant. A chill ran through her. She asked uneasily whether they were thinking of sending Dale to the battlefield. Alan denied it. The boy wasn't ready for that yet, and he wasn't asking his own son to go to the front lines. But it was the Saxon family's duty to take responsibility for their own territory, and Dale was the eldest son. Sophia knew her apprentice was no ordinary child. Alan asked what she suggested. He considered that it might be a good idea to lend his son an artifact, something that would help him better control his own power. That kind of artifact carried immense force and demanded great talent from whoever used it. It could be activated with mana, or even at the cost of one's own life. The more powerful it was, the harder it was to control, and in the worst case, it could cost the user their life. The Saxon family had dealt with this kind of power for generations, and the duchy kept a vast stockpile of these items. As the eldest son, Dale needed to prepare for battle. The boy was surprised to learn he would finally be taking part in something like this. His father explained that he would be joining the subjugation of the orc horde that would soon reach the territory. Before that, however, the two of them walked up to a large door. Dale needed to learn how to control the shadow power of the Saxon family. When he stepped inside, the boy's eyes went wide. The room was enormous, filled with artifacts, all of them part of the Demon King's legacy, kept by the family for generations. These were no ordinary items. They were relics carrying an overwhelming magical power. Dale was warned. The more powerful the artifact, the more dangerous it became. He was not to touch anything before knowing how to control it. The two adults turned to continue the explanation and realized Dale was no longer beside them. The boy was already exploring the stockpile on his own. As he walked among the relics, he thought to himself that he needed to find something that suited him. Then a sinister voice echoed from a shield, asking if he wished to take revenge. It claimed to feel the hatred and pain in his heart. Soon other voices followed, the dark magic artifacts themselves, all speaking at once. Dale brought a hand to his chest. Those relics were reacting to the hatred inside him. Even so, none of them seemed to be what he was looking for. He needed something even more powerful. It was then, as he made his way through the room, that the boy came across a cloak that seemed like it hadn't been there before. Studying it carefully, he recognized what it was: the Shadow Cloak, a high-level artifact, previously used by Duke Berta, captain of the demon army, someone the protagonist had fought in his past life as a hero. The cloak had the ability to merge with shadows, making its user extremely difficult to fight. Without hesitating, Dale decided to test it. At that moment, Alan and Cephia appeared in the corridor, worried, calling out for him. But the cloak had already wrapped around him completely, hiding him from both of them. Dale was pulled into the artifact's inner space. A voice began to echo, repeating endlessly that it was hungry. This was no ordinary shadow. In the past, whoever wore this cloak could control shadows as if they were living creatures. But to do that, one had to subjugate the entity that dwelled within the artifact. As expected, it wouldn't be easy. Dale began to sweat. Outside, the Duke and Cephia watched as a massive purple aura took shape where the cloak had been. The elf realized it was taking too long. Alan warned that if it dragged on, the boy could be consumed by the shadow creature. Tense, Cephia asked what they would do in that case. Alan replied that they would have to force him out. Before they could act, a blinding light burst through the room. Dale reappeared seemingly unharmed. With a smile, he said everything was fine. Cephia moved toward him quickly, checking whether he was hurt. The boy explained that he had felt only a slight tingling, but that he was perfectly fine. Alan frowned, puzzled. How could such a powerful artifact be mastered by a mere child? Dale approached his father with his eyes gleaming and said he had a request. Could he try picking up one more artifact? The boy's excitement caught both his master and the Duke off guard. Even so, Alan decided to allow it, and so began Dale's exploration of the artifact stockpile. A few days later, Dale goes to train with his uncle wearing the Shadow Cloak. Helmet can barely hide his surprise when he sees the boy with that artifact. He asks if the young master is all right. After all, it's an item notoriously difficult to control. Dale says he only feels a slight itch. He figures the cloak was stored away for so long that it lost some of its power, but that it latched onto him the moment it sensed his energy. It's almost as if the artifact simply wanted to be his friend. Even so, a dense black aura pulses beneath his feet as he walks with a smile. Dale says he appreciated his uncle's trust, and that he has a request: a real duel as combat training. Excited, Helmet takes a battle stance and promises to give his best so as not to disappoint the young master. Only then does Dale feel the weight of that presence. The aura of one of the continent's 7 swordsmen is overwhelming. Just being near it puts pressure on the entire body. Helmet smiles and tells the boy not to be intimidated, explaining that he'll use only swordsmanship without drawing on his aura. That irritates Dale. To him, a true knight fights with everything he has. Even so, the goal of this duel is clear: to learn and practice how to use the Shadow Cloak. Depending on his performance, the artifact's true potential will be revealed, and for that, training is the only way. Dale extends his arms and fires a burst of shadow blades. Helmet reacts instantly, delivering a strike that shatters the entire attack on impact alone. Dale is left speechless. No aura, and still that much power. Helmet laughs, praises the young master's effort, and moves forward, saying it's his turn now. Dale falls back with a tense expression, barely dodging a fast strike. Helmet watches every movement closely, fascinated as he notices that the artifact's black aura allows for the creation of traps. Even so, the boy's defense isn't enough to protect him completely. Helmet leaps and brings a direct strike down on him. Dale extends his hands and blocks, with visible effort, but he blocks. The impact sends him sliding back, but the black aura stays active. Helmet frowns, impressed. That strike was strong enough to shatter ordinary swords. Only a high-level artifact could have absorbed it. Helmet announces they'll exchange 10 more strikes and that he'll give everything he has. That day, after the training, the knights who watched comment among themselves that none of them had ever lasted more than 2 exchanges against the captain. Even being just a boy, Dale looked like an immovable mountain. A few days later, on the morning of the departure, Dale talks with his mother. Elena admits that no matter how hard she tries to accept it, she can't bring herself herself to feel at ease sending her son to such a dangerous place. Dale tries to reassure her. Helmut and his father will be by his side, but she remains uneasy. He then explains what he feels. He wants to grow stronger so that one day he can inherit the dukedom. When that moment comes, he wants to be ready to protect his father, his mother, and his sister Lise. He asks her to let him grow strong enough for that. With tears welling in her eyes, Elena accepts. She only asks that he be very careful. Dale mounts his horse and promises he'll be back soon. At dawn, at the forward base, Helmut leads a large formation of knights. Alan turns to his son and asks him to give the order to march himself. He explains that the Black Cavalry will one day be under Dale's command, so it's better to start getting used to leading them. Dale takes in those words. Those knights aren't his father's, they're his. Raising his hand, the boy declares it's time to move out, and that they will go, with pride, to defend House Saxon. The knights raise their weapons and answer that they will follow the young master's orders. Then all of them ride out at full gallop toward the battlefield. For this battle, 250 knights have been assembled, along with an elite marksman unit positioned in the White Mountains, the Winter Watchers. On the other side, a horde of roughly 1,000 orcs. They cross the upper part of the Saxon River, fleeing the cold and hunger, and will soon push into the lower region. The plan is to launch a surprise attack before that happens. But the only way for 250 men to cross a deep river quickly is through magic. Sophia steps forward and asks everyone to fall back. She begins casting the spell, announcing that she will create an ice bridge. Dale is glad to see his master on the battlefield, but quickly realizes how much this must cost her, someone who follows a doctrine against violence, there, in the middle of a military campaign. Pouring all of her power into it, Sophia raises a massive ice bridge, solid enough to hold the entire army. The path is open. The elf says she's rooting for the Duke's victory. Alan thanks her, as always. Dale looks at his master warmly and says his goodbye. Sophia brings her hand to her heart. Something unsettled stirs inside her as she watches her disciple leave. Her eyes fill with tears. She never imagined she would have a disciple who cared so much about her. Sometime later, we see the orcs' temporary base. The scout unit, the Winter Watchers, is already in position for the ambush. Suddenly, fire arrows tear through the sky like fireworks and rain down on the enemy camp. The orcs are caught completely off guard. Many die before they can even react, and the ground quickly fills with bodies. Helmut orders the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd Cavalry battalions to advance. The knights charge out in wedge formation. As he watches the charge, Helmut asks what Dale thinks of it. The boy, however, is lost in his own thoughts, analyzing the horse's speed, the weight of the armor, the crouching lance strategy. A tactic capable of piercing the enemy's defense while keeping a distance of 3 to 4 meters, even deadlier when combined with the knight's aura. Dale remarks that the attack is completely one-sided. Helmut agrees, saying that's the true power of the ducal house's cavalry, but warns that it's too early to let their guard down. The battle is just getting started. The orcs regroup quickly and push forward, wielding large shields and sharp spears. The ambush was effective, but not enough to wipe them out. It's time to pull back, reorganize, and finish them off with successive strikes. A signal rises in the sky, the order to retreat. The forces pull back immediately, horses racing away from the field. The orcs are confused for a moment, but that confusion quickly turns into dangerous irritation. As one of the knights flees, the orcs aim their spears in his direction. One of them strikes the horse dead on. The animal goes down, throwing the knight to the ground. Dale sees everything. He swallows hard. Even though the soldier hasn't suffered any serious injuries yet, the Duke already considers him a casualty. An orc moves in fast to finish him off. Dale looks back and asks why his father and uncle are just standing there watching. The two exchange glances, saying nothing. The boy starts calculating. Riding down there on horseback would take too long. The only option is a ranged attack, but orc hide is far tougher than that of other monsters. His magic formula needs to be adjusted. For the ice bolt, Dale decides to incorporate a long-range firing structure and a variation inspired by an assault rifle, boosting both power and stability. He makes a gesture with his fingers, as if holding a weapon, and takes careful aim at the orc about to strike the fallen knight. The enemy raises its weapon for the final blow. Dale fires. The projectile hits the orc square in the head. Helmut is taken aback. Even at that distance, the precision was impressive, but Dale is already moving. The Duke asks Helmut to let the boy act. Crafting such a unique formula at his age already shows lethal power, and it reveals that Dale's inner world is developed enough for him to fight. With a serious expression, the boy heads toward the field. The orcs have finished regrouping, and one of them charges forward. Dale is dealing with two problems at once. The first, the fallen knight is panicking and can't get up. The second, his formula is too long for close combat. He needs to simplify it. As he moves forward, he starts working on a new variation, something faster, a direct shot. Still complex, but functional in battle. The idea takes shape, an ice bullet. The knight on the ground notices Dale approaching. So does the orc. At the exact right moment, Dale fires. The ice bullet traces a precise arc through the air and hits the enemy in the head. The orc drops instantly. The knight stares at the boy, stunned, and asks why he's risking so much to save him. Dale dismounts and approaches calmly. He answers that there's no need to worry. House Saxon never abandons a sword that shows loyalty. The soldier tries to pull himself together, but two more orcs close in with fury in their eyes. Dale isn't going to let that happen. He extends his hand, and the moment the enemies get close, he releases his shadow blades. A purple aura sweeps across the field and shatters the orcs' weapons with ease. With a sarcastic smile, Dale commands his dark aura to devour them. The monster's eyes go white, empty. A sphere of purple energy forms around its body, and then it falls apart, collapsing lifeless beside the other orc. Within seconds, what remains turns to skeleton through the boy's necromancy magic. Dale smiles and wonders out loud why the other orcs haven't run yet. To wrap things up, he fires one more ice bullet. With that done, the young boy turns to the soldier, still in a panic, and tells him everything is fine now. The man replies that he can't move his legs. Dale assesses the situation and acts without hesitation. With strength that's remarkable for an 8-year-old, he lifts the soldier and carries him to safety. He says he'll leave the rest in Uncle Helmet's hands. Helmet smiles at the sight and gives the order for all battalions to advance in a simultaneous assault. Driven by high morale, the soldiers charge forward with a battle cry, all for the young Master Dale. A short while later, back at the Saxon base, the orc subjugation is confirmed as complete. The Duke calls for his son. He has a question about the battle. He wants to know the real reason the boy charged into enemy lines alone. Visibly irritated, the man faces Dale and demands to know why he would do something so reckless. Dale is confused, sweating, unable to understand why he's being scolded. Dale begins explaining to his father why he charged into enemy territory alone. The Knights of House Saxon are the ones who will one day serve under his command. That's why he did what he believed was right in that moment. The Duke replies that the reason is far too weak. Dale pushes back, pointing out that his own father is known for valuing his knights, so why did he stand there and watch one of them die? Alan explains that the knights of the northern border don't expect to be saved. On the battlefield, each one has to think and act on their own to survive. Anyone who acts while waiting for someone to always come to the rescue won't last long. The soldiers need to sharpen their skills constantly, and the Duke only steps in when the enemy is beyond what they can handle. Dale realizes he has no way to argue against that, and he feels a weight in his chest as he understands he had forgotten something that, in another life, he had carried deep within himself. Even so, after the reprimand, his father places a hand on his son's shoulder. He acknowledges that the boy acted according to his convictions, and says that's something that must never be lost. The Duke opens the tent, letting sunlight pour in, and asks the two of them to return to the castle. The story of the Duke's son rushing to save a knight was exactly the kind of thing the Empire's gossips lived for. One of them even claimed out loud that the young man had defeated over 1,000 orcs on his own. The story spread like wildfire. Dale found the whole thing embarrassing, but the event ended up bringing a new wave of energy to the duchy. Sometime later, on the training grounds, the knights had started treating him almost like a deity. Embarrassed, the boy kept insisting they didn't need to act that way. Helmet disagreed. He said it was something to be proud of, and that Dale should embrace it. Raising his hand to rally the men, he reinforced that this kind of recognition made them stronger. And sure enough, the soldiers' morale was visibly rising. It was then that a maid approached to inform them that the guests from House Orlhart were about to arrive. Dale thanked her, and the two of them got ready to head out. The boy knew he would soon be meeting people of importance. House Orlhart was known as a warrior family, once one of the great noble houses of the Kingdom of Teutonia, led by Barthel. But during the War of Unification, Teutonia fell. With the death of the Divine Sword, the family was ruined. Helmet seemed downcast, probably thinking of the one who had inspired him to become a knight, a memory that still carried a bitter taste. When they arrived at the main hall, where Dale's parents were already waiting, the Duke asked if the boy had been training. Dale confirmed he had. A butler announced the arrival of the guests, and Alan ordered that they be treated with the utmost respect. A woman dressed in mourning approached, accompanied by a small blonde girl. The woman introduced herself as Vanessa Orlhart, greeting the Duke of Saxon with humility. The girl, however, stood completely still. Vanessa glanced back with a look of disapproval and introduced her daughter, Charlotte Orlhart, who was clearly unhappy with all of this. Dale was surprised to see Charlotte question her own mother right then and there. The girl asked what kind of behavior that was and why she was bowing to these people. The Duke tried to ease the tension, saying the two of them had made a long and tiring journey. He then asked Dale to accompany Lady Charlotte and show her around the castle. With a friendly smile, the boy extended his hand, inviting her. Charlotte looked at him with a cold expression and slapped his hand hard. Dale was taken aback, feeling the sting in his palm. The Duke and Elena were also caught off guard. Charlotte seemed to realize she had gone too far, but she didn't apologize. She remarked in a dry tone that this kind of behavior was typical of uneducated imperial nobles. Her mother ordered her to apologize. Charlotte simply turned her back and kept walking. Desperate, Vanessa called out for her to wait. Turning to the couple, she begged them to forgive her daughter's rudeness and explained that Charlotte didn't usually act this way. She had been shaken by things that had happened recently. Elena asked what had happened. Vanessa revealed that not long ago, Count Brandenburg had been appointed as inspector of their territory. The man was known throughout the empire both for his skill and for his nickname, the Pig King. Obsessed with producing a powerful heir, he pursued talented swordsmen without regard for age or gender, even if it was a girl who hadn't even reached puberty yet. Vanessa said she had managed to flee with her daughter just in time, before he could get his hands on her. But she knew that kind of trauma didn't simply go away. With a trembling voice, she said she would do anything to protect Charlotte. However, as a fallen noble, she had no power to do so. That was why she was begging them to take her daughter in, even as a servant. That way, that man could never reach her again. Meanwhile, far from there, Dale and Charlotte were alone. The boy called out to her, rubbing the back of his neck, and asked if she even knew where she was going. Charlotte admitted she didn't. After a moment, she asked if his hand was all right. Dale said it was and told her not to worry about it. Gripping her sword, the blonde said that was a relief. Then, without warning, she drew the blade and pointed it at him. With a firm voice, she demanded they duel. Almost as if giving an order to a subordinate, she shouted at him to draw his sword immediately. Dale broke into a cold sweat. This girl was the type who only ever did exactly what she wanted. Despite Charlotte's insistent request for a duel, Dale said he would need a reason for that. The girl explained that she had heard many rumors about him, an incredible mage who had killed over 1,000 orcs and even saved a knight. That was exactly the kind of fame Dale figured would bring consequences. For Charlotte, defeating someone so respected would prove her own worth. And more than that, it would show her family that she was capable of protecting them from that man, the swordmaster, Count Brandenburg. Hearing that name sent a chill through Dale's body. He knew that face all too well. He had never forgotten it, for it was yet another one of the Empire's wretches who had betrayed him in the past. For a moment, Dale realized their goals were not so different. Maybe they could be allies, but first he needed to show her how the world really worked. He turned away, walked to a barrel full of swords, and grabbed one. He remarked that she still didn't understand anything. Then he pointed the blade at the blonde and told her to come at him with everything she had. Eyes burning with rage, Charlotte replied that he didn't even need to say that, and she charged like a thunderbolt. The swords clashed with a loud crash. Charlotte was good. She managed to break through Dale's guard a few times, striking with a considerable amount of aura. Just as mages manipulate mana through magic circles, knights transcend their limits by accumulating aura within their own bodies. Every blow she landed carried that weight behind it. Even so, Dale defended himself with ease, barely showing any effort. With each dodge, she countered immediately. The girl's lineage didn't lie. Her skill was far beyond what he had expected. The duel dragged on, and the constant sound of clashing blades echoed through the area. That was when Dale noticed something. Charlotte was fighting while carrying a burden. Her father had died before she was even born, but her mother had always told stories about him. A bearer of the divine sword, someone who never backed down. Even after the fall of their homeland and the ruin of their family, Charlotte believed she had to take on that role. Protect her loved ones with the sword in place of the father she had never known. But she couldn't understand why she couldn't overcome that boy. With everything she had, she charged once more. The sword aimed straight at Dale's abdomen. He dodged with a quick movement and, in the same instant, countered, pushing her back. Charlotte was lost. She couldn't accept it. How was it possible that the daughter of the divine sword couldn't win? Dale said the problem was simple. She wasn't the divine sword yet, that it was natural to feel proud of her father, but that the way she was now, she would never be able to protect her family from that man because he was far stronger. Desperate, Charlotte began to cry. With a trembling voice, she asked what she was supposed to do. Dale turned around and made a promise. He swore, in the name of his family, that he would become the guardian of House Orlhart. Charlotte's eyes went wide in surprise. He continued, saying that until the day she was strong enough to defeat him, he and his family would be her shield. Stunned, she asked why. Dale answered simply that it was because she was worth it. Then he asked whether the blonde was willing to swear that, in the future, she would become part of his family and the sword of House Saxon. With a tearful smile, Charlotte said there was no way she could refuse an offer like that. She knelt before him and, with the honor of a knight, made her vow. It seemed like nothing more than a promise between children, but that moment sealed something that would carry great weight in the future. Two young prodigies had just formed a powerful alliance. Later in Duke Saxon's office, Dale spoke with his father. Alan explained that, as requested, Lady Orlhart was now part of the duchy as a servant. He mentioned it was unexpected, but that upon learning Charlotte had agreed, he realized it had something to do with his son. Dale confirmed it and explained that the two of them had made a promise, that he had sworn, in the name of the family, to protect House Orlhart. The Duke asked with suspicion whether that had been done out of pity alone. Dale denied it. He said he had seen extraordinary talent in her, along with the lineage of the divine sword, and he revealed his true goal in making that promise, one day, to have a new divine sword rise alongside his family. The Duke closed his eyes, satisfied. Dale smiled, sensing he had his father's approval. Meanwhile, in the old capital of Teutonia, Malborok, a wine glass shattered on the floor. Count Brandenburg stood there, furious, demanding to know how they dared to fail, how they could have been deceived like that. A soldier explained that assassins had been sent, but were killed before reaching Saxon. Suspicion had fallen on Charlotte Orlhart. The Count closed his eyes, his irritation growing. He muttered that every single one of them was useless. Without exception, he walked toward the sword mounted on the wall and ran his hand along the blade. Suddenly, he recalled a moment on the battlefield from some time ago. Sliding his fingers across the steel, he murmured to the sword, Durandal, asking what it thought of all this. To him, it was not just a weapon. It was like a bride. And he asked it to wait a little longer, for he would bring into the world the perfect lineage to wield it once more. He turned his gaze back to the soldier and gave a new order, to get in touch with the Thieves' Guild and send them to the duchy immediately. With a wicked smile, he made it clear he would pay any price. He wanted Charlotte back no matter the cost. A week passed since the children's oath. During that time, Charlotte went through rigorous training as a lady-in-waiting. The duels with Dale became part of the routine, always under Uncle Helmet's supervision. Dale takes his position with a confident smile, ready to begin. Charlotte gets ready too, though a little more on edge. Helmet closes his eyes for a moment and gives the signal. The swords meet almost instantly. Dale keeps the upper hand, easily dodging each attack, but Charlotte doesn't give in, and the boy notices how much she's improved. She can already block his strikes now. Helmet watches the two of them with pride. Up close, it no longer looks like a duel between children. The level is that of real knights. Even so, something unsettles him, an intense killing intent and impressive speed coming from both of them. During the fight, Dale uses his cape to try to block an attack. Charlotte spots the opening and moves in fast, setting up a decisive thrust, but Helmet steps in and the strike is cut short. He praises her progress. Charlotte has no interest in praise. She tells him to save the empty words and asks what she's still missing. Helmet looks at her and asks if she knows the true principle behind using a rapier. The girl answers that it's thrusting. He disagrees. The most important thing is footwork, movement, and positioning. Dale demonstrates it in practice, closes the distance, dodges each thrust with precision. At that moment, Charlotte should have already stepped back, created space, looked for another opening. Her stance and footwork are still uneven, sloppy. Since she never had a real teacher, the fundamentals need to be rebuilt from scratch. The criticism gets to Charlotte. Noticing that, Dale ruffles her hair and says he was just messing with her. She's cute, after all. The mood lightens a little. Building a mana circle is a slow and complex process. You have to feel the flow of mana around the heart and wait until a stable root forms. It can take decades. Cephia asks Dale if he's already completed the second circle. The boy confirms that he has. The rotation speed of mana is measured in RPM. First circle mages usually reach around 300 rotations per minute. Dale is well above that, which means he already has what it takes to reach the third circle. Even so, he decides to focus on refining what he already has. He starts working on the ice bullet, strengthening the molecular bonds to increase the projectile's weight and hardness. He aims at a tree trunk, concentrates as hard as he can, and fires. The projectile flies and pierces the target without trouble. Dale looks at the result and wonders if it was always this easy to create rounds capable of piercing armor. Cephia smiles, proud. It was expected. The boy learns too fast. Dale credits it all to his teacher and says he'll always be grateful to her. From the knight's rescue to everything involving Charlotte, each situation only deepens the trust the elf places in him. To Sophia, the boy's talent is so great, it's almost frightening. But that apprentice is a source of pride, and she pulls him into a tight hug, a gesture so warm it leaves the boy completely flustered. At sunset, in the castle's central garden, Dale is still thinking about that moment with Sophia. Maybe she still sees him as a child. He decides not to dwell on it. The focus now is training. Concentrated, he raises a wall of ice. He extends his hands and channels energy over it. This time he creates a variation, an ice bullet in a cartridge shape like a spread shot. Several small projectiles are launched at the same time, hitting the barrier with precision. Some ricochet, and Dale raises a defense around himself almost in the same instant. Looking at the result, he starts thinking about the next step, maybe adding a fragmentation property. A voice interrupts him. It's Charlotte, who approaches surprised to find him training there. She mentions she was practicing the footwork Helmet taught her. Dale comments that it sounds like she's enjoying learning. The girl confirms it with a smile, and then, a little awkwardly, starts to apologize. She admits she was selfish and rude to him. When she calls him by his name, she quickly corrects herself to young master. Dale closes his eyes for a moment and agrees. She really was rude, and more than that. But he smiles right after and says it's fine. He'll make a special exception and forgive her. Charlotte asks in surprise if he's serious. He confirms it and tells her not to be so formal. The two lean against a tree and talk for a while. Charlotte mentions that she likes the cold air there. Even when training at night, the temperature drops fast and everything feels fresher. Dale agrees and watches the girl smiling. He notices there's someone here who shares tastes similar to his own. For a moment, he feels his heart grow warm. The two of them are being watched from a distance, through a window. Elena smiles as she tells her husband that their son has already entered the flirting phase. The man asks if she thinks the two of them make a good match. She answers that only time will tell. Elena says that a mother's duty is to help her son be honest with his own feelings. Sometime later, on the outskirts of the duchy, Elena is talking with a bread vendor and asking the old man to take better care of his health. The poorer district of the city is overrun with beggars and homeless people, and that's where the Duchess carries out her charity work, handing out food and basic supplies. That year, Charlotte and Dale started joining her. As they walked through the area, a ragged little boy approached Charlotte in tears, asking for help. His mother was in danger. Dale grew suspicious. The boy had asked Charlotte for help instead of an adult, and the group was drifting away from their escort. Scanning the rooftops, he spotted a hooded figure. He concluded that the suspect was part of a group of thieves, most likely sent by Saxon, and that Charlotte was the target. The little boy asked them to wait there and promised he'd be right back with his mother. But what showed up instead were men armed with knives. One of them, the leader, said he hadn't expected to find someone so noble in such a dangerous place. He stated that their interest was in the maid beside the boy, and that the young master should stay out of it. He held up his knife and warned Dale that he could end up getting hurt if he acted on impulse. Dale smiled and declared that he had sworn to protect his friend, especially from dangers like this one. The bandit laughed, remarked that the chivalry of a young noble was truly admirable, but that it would be better to read the situation more carefully. The other men started to move. The leader said Dale needed to learn about the harshness of the real world. Charlotte warned him, worried, that she had left her sword back at the castle. Dale replied calmly that there was no reason to be afraid. It was the perfect opportunity to test his new ability, the Shadow Mantle. As the bandits closed in, Dale held his ground. A purple aura began to rise from his body, forming a strange wind that made the enemies uneasy. The leader shouted for everyone to get out of the way. He recognized the danger before the others did. The aura intensified and pushed the men back. One of them, however, was completely engulfed by the energy. The Shadow Mantle implanted a shadow creature into the bandit's body like a parasite, turning him into an undead soldier capable of acting on his own. The leader was stunned. The possessed henchman transformed into a monstrous creature, with claws sprouting all over his body. He began repeating on a loop that he was hungry, so very hungry. Desperate, the leader ordered the others to attack and destroy the creature. The green-haired man declared that he no longer cared about the boy's identity. Any mistake there could mean the end of all of them. The bandits moved against Dale. The green-haired man moved at high speed around the protagonist, hurling multiple daggers. Dale defended himself with ease, shielded by the black aura. Without hesitating, the bandit went for a direct attack, lunging toward the boy. Dale was already ready. He fired a devastating projectile with his double-barreled 12-gauge skill. The impact hit the enemy dead on and sent him flying through the air. Charlotte watched it all, unable to hide her surprise. Meanwhile, the undead created by Dale kept taking down the remaining henchmen. The leader, badly wounded, said it wasn't over yet, and charged at the protagonist. He ended up being struck by a magic circle Dale had already prepared. The undead kept repeating that he was hungry, so very hungry, as he brought down the last of the bandits. After the fight, Dale walked over to Charlotte and asked if she was all right. The sole survivor watched the scene, which looked like something out of a horror movie, and started screaming desperately. Before he could get away, Dale fired an ice bullet that hit his leg. Then he undid the magic and put an end to the undead, who was still writhing. The cornered thief begged for his life, promising to tell everything he knew. He insisted he would reveal whatever information was asked of him, but before he could say another word, a bullet struck his forehead. Dale said coldly that he had no interest in hearing anything. The bandit fell dead to the ground. Charlotte looked around, still shaken by everything that had happened. Dale explained that this was the true face of the Saxon Duchy, something many feared, but also the power that would be able to protect her. Then he asked with a worried look what she thought of all that, whether she was scared. Charlotte closed her eyes for a moment before answering that she was fine. After all, her friend had fought to protect her. She said that after the oath made the day before, she had also made a promise to herself, that her family would become the shield that protected him, and that, in the future, she intended to repay that kindness by becoming a sword wielded for his sake. With an eager smile, she thanked Dale for showing her that future, and promised she would grow stronger. The reaction left the boy visibly surprised. He got lost in his own thoughts, trying to understand why he felt such a strong urge to protect Charlotte. Part of it seemed to come from the guilt he carried over Lord Babel, but as he reached his hand out toward her, he realized that if Charlotte truly wished to become his sword, that carried a much greater meaning than he had imagined. The two children's hands met, marking the beginning of a bond that could never be undone. In the territory of Count Brandenburg, the man stood motionless before his desk, sweating, his hand trembling. In his hands was a letter. The sender acknowledged that the journey would be difficult, but still invited him to come to the Duke of Saxon's castle and asked that he take the sincerity of the invitation into consideration, that he not refuse. It was a direct summons from the Black Duke, who held him responsible for the incident, a situation that left no choice, not even for someone known as the Sword Saint. A few days later, Brandenburg stood before the Duke inside Saxon Castle. Alan remarked that the journey must have been hard, said he hadn't expected him to arrive so soon, and apologized if the reception wasn't up to standard. Visibly tense, Brandenburg placed a hand over his heart and replied that nothing could be more urgent than a call from his grace. His gaze then shifted to the two children as dark thoughts crossed his mind. He mentioned that there was great concern within the Empire over the recent unrest in the territory. A kidnapping in broad daylight was the kind of thing that drew attention. He said he could imagine why he had been summoned, but questioned how someone like himself, known as the Emperor's loyal sword, could possibly be involved in something so repugnant. Before he could continue, Alan released a purple aura in his direction. The energy generated a powerful wind that left Brandenburg's men completely thrown off. Within moments, the soldiers began to disintegrate, overtaken by despair at what was happening. Brandenburg watched in shock as his order of holy knights was destroyed without even managing to fight back. Turning his gaze back to the Duke, he asked what kind of magic that was. High-level dark magic, the Nihil Storm. In a firm voice, Alan declared that if Brandenburg ever laid a hand on the children again, the duchy would exterminate every member of his family. He demanded that message be burned deep into his mind and never forgotten. Then he shifted his tone and said, the man must be tired from the long journey, inviting him to make himself at home. Shaken, Brandenburg thanked his grace for his generosity, but he stated that due to certain circumstances, it would be difficult to remain in the territory any longer. He turned to leave. Alan said he hoped the return journey would be safe. The Count of Brandenburg was one of the Emperor's most loyal followers, and he had just witnessed something very important, something that could become the bomb capable of shaking the foundations of the Empire. At first, it would be nothing more than a small spark, but that spark would quickly turn into a fire, and in the end, severing the Sword Saint's head would be a role meant for the protagonist. Over time, rumors began to spread that the Sword Saint had knelt before the Black Duke. Alan lifted a cloth, revealing something that left Sephia completely stunned. Before her were the bodies of the guild members, the same bandits who had attacked Dale that day. The teacher took a moment to process that it had been her own student who had left them in that state. The bodies were mutilated, missing organs, crushed, and riddled with holes. For the first time, Sephia began to question whether her way of teaching was truly right. Alan, however, stated that she was indispensable for guiding Dale's talent down the right path. For that reason, he was offering her the position of chief advisor. The elf lowered her head, troubled, understanding deep down the true meaning behind that invitation. She was being called to become part of the Saxon family, not merely a tutor. Even with Dale's father present, guiding him was not a task anyone could handle alone. With a powerful elf by his side, everything everything would be different. In a firm voice, Safia accepted. She said she understood the situation, and that knowing that child, she was certain this would be the hardest assignment she had ever taken on. Time passed, and soon Dale's 10th birthday arrived. This time, members of the Emperor's faction also attended the banquet. Among them, the most notable guest was someone special, the famous Marquis Ulysse, a man with red hair and a gentle smile. He approached with a friendly expression and said it was a pleasure to meet the young Master Dale. Even before Ulysse introduced himself, the guests were already impressed by the abundance of the banquet. Some commented that it was hard to believe they were in the heart of the North, sitting before such a generous table. One of the nobles even admitted he felt foolish for having worried about the duchy's distance from the empire. The nobles of the imperial capital represented the greatest force under the emperor's name, and their presence there was no coincidence. It was a clear message from the imperial family. They would not stand idle in the face of what they considered an insult to the Sword Saint, and the man who best embodied that message had already approached Dale with a friendly smile and a calculated bow. Ulysse was the head of the Red Magic Tower, a group that pursued fire, fury, and order through raw power. The mages of that tower believed strength defined everything, and they had no hesitation in becoming instruments of greater ambitions. Dale had already passed through their hands more than once. Ulysse remarked that he had heard of the boy's unmatched talent, and that the rumors about him wiping out an entire orc order to protect a knight of the family, at just 9 years old, were breathtaking. He said it was exactly what one would expect from the son of such a powerful duke. Dale gave a polite bow and thanked him, wishing the Marquis a pleasant stay. Later, walking alone through the corridors, Dale thought that receiving that kind of praise every year was always exhausting. If he had the choice, he would be training with Charlotte right now. But officially, the girl was just one of his mother's attendants. It would be far too dangerous if anyone found out that the sword god's daughter was practicing swordsmanship. He was still lost in his own thoughts when he heard a desperate cry. A gruff voice was ordering a girl to be quiet, calling her a wretched servant. Dale ran toward the sound. A young woman was on the ground, pleading and saying she was just a servant of House Saxon. Standing over her, a stocky red-haired man glared at her with contempt, declaring that a mere servant had no business even daring to mention the duchy's name. With the young lord's birthday celebration, everyone was busy enjoying themselves, and he intended to enjoy himself in his own way. Cornering the girl, he ordered her to do as he said. Dale stepped in immediately, demanding to know what this was about. The man recognized the young master and tried to explain himself in a muddled way, but Dale pressed on. The man then asked, with a disgusting grin, whether the boy had ever been with a woman before. He said that he himself, Petro, could teach him personally, and that the boy would enjoy it. Dale had no patience for it. He began gathering a magic circle in the palm of his hand and declared that he was going to save the servant. Petro believed that in a society so rigid in its hierarchies, the boy would never have the nerve to attack someone connected to the empire. He was wrong. An extremely sharp ice projectile grazed the man's face. Caught off guard, Petro fell to the ground, realizing just how close he had come to dying. Dale did not back down. He knew full well that raising his hand against someone tied to the empire could have serious consequences, and he did not care. His face wounded, Petro demanded to know what that meant. Dale raised his voice and ordered the man to get on his knees and apologize to Miss Eve. She belonged to House Saxon, as she herself had said. Petro replied that he was there representing the emperor, and that insulting an imperial representative to defend the honor of a mere servant was unforgivable. Dale fired back immediately, asking whether it was the emperor's custom to harass other people's servants. Sputtering with indignation, Petro pointed his finger at the boy. Before the situation could escalate, others arrived at the scene. Unaware of them, Dale declared that this was the last time he would ask the man to kneel. Ulysse watched the scene with a peculiar smile and remarked to the Duke that this was quite an interesting spectacle. Alan stepped in, demanding to know what kind of trouble was going on. Dale explained that the man had tried to harass a servant of the family. The Duke questioned whether something so trivial justified treating Lord Petro with such disrespect. Petro tried to stand, but Dale cut him off. He had not given him permission to rise. The boy then declared that the nobles who had come from the imperial capital carried the responsibility of acting in the emperor's name. This man had tarnished that name by harassing a servant, and he would not tolerate it. Ulysse interrupted, praising the young master's intelligence. He said his words were flawless, and that someone who acts in the emperor's name should never commit such a shameful act. As he spoke, he gathered magic in the palm of his hand and murmured a single word, Taulara. Then he looked at Petro and declared that this worm deserved to die. Desperate, Petro tried to flee with what little speed he had. It was no use. The flames had already begun to consume his body. A burst of fire struck him head on, bringing intense and unbearable pain. As Petro was completely incinerated, Ulysse Romulus stated that it fell to him to punish anyone who dared insult the imperial family, and then remarked that his expectations for young Master Dale's future were very high. Dale heard him and understood that might not have been a compliment. After all that commotion, the Emperor's men leave the castle and peace returns to the place. Sometime later, a maid wakes young Master Dale. She approaches and lets him know it's time to get up. Dale thanks her, but notices a quiet sadness on the girl's face. He asks if she has something else to say. She hesitates for a moment before answering that it's an honor to serve him. Dale finds it strange that she needed that long to say something so simple, but understands he'll have to get used to this kind of situation. He thanks her back and says it's nothing special. Even so, he's fully aware of who he is, the eldest son of the Saxon Duchy, and he's determined to use every resource at his disposal to bring down the Empire. At another point, Alan calls his son in for a talk. He says he's always seen him as a brilliant child, but that his recent behavior has been a little strange. Dale, cautious, asks what his father means. He then lays out his reasoning. If the hero from another world hadn't died in the battle against Divine Sword Lord Bartel, the next target would have been, without a doubt, the Saxon Duchy's territory. Alan finds the claim bold and asks where all that certainty comes from. Deep down, Dale knows he can't reveal the truth, that in his past life he already knew the Empire's plans against House Saxon, and that the hero's power was discarded out of fear it would become uncontrollable. So he presents a justification he can stand behind. The previous year, when the hero defeated the Demon King, the Empire didn't wipe out the darkness from that territory. Instead, it ordered the land to be cultivated as imperial domain and forced House Saxon to spend its own resources. It granted the Duke responsibility over that territory, and as long as the darkness persists, the family's resources will keep being drained. On top of that, both the Empire's people and those outside the north began calling the family the Dark Clan. Just as the hero was discarded, the Empire's logical next step would be to eliminate an internal threat. Alan asks how his son knows the hero was discarded. Dale answers that it's deduction, based on various records he's read. Officially, it said the hero died honorably facing Lord Bartel, but the real story is known by very few, and that impresses the Duke. Dale concludes that if his theory is correct, the Empire's justice is nothing more than oppression and violence against weaker territories. Alan acknowledges that his son carries a wisdom far beyond his age. He then asks what path Dale believes House Saxon should take. Dale answers without hesitation. There's no possibility of coexistence with the Empire. The family's fate depends on destroying it. Alan is left without a reaction for a moment. He manages only to say his son's name before asking, with a serious look, whether Dale truly understands the weight of what he's saying. Dale explains he's not proposing to gather an army and launch an immediate rebellion. It's a plan for roughly 10 years down the line. There are already forces across the continent seeking independence. Leaders who, like the Duke of Saxon, were betrayed by the Empire. The economy is declining, the number of bandits is growing, and even with the continent unified, the consequences of the war keep getting worse. Until then, House Saxon must build up enough strength to protect itself and support resistance movements in other regions. Dale lays out the entire plan, talking until the sun begins to set on the horizon. When he finishes, he asks what his father thinks. A smile appears on the Duke's face, which soon turns into a laugh. Alan says his son's talent is truly unmatched, that the boy sees far beyond what the Duke himself can. He declares that he feels honored to have him as a son, and that from that moment on, Dale is no longer seen merely as the firstborn or as a 10-year-old child. He is to be treated with the respect owed to the future leader of House Saxon. Alan says he will listen to him and respect him as an equal, and asks, without further ceremony, what decision Dale would make for the family. Taking the opening, Dale asks for permission to take part in the Tower Trial in Necropolis. The trial consists of duels that determine the hierarchy among mages who face the Tower's guardians. Those who defeat high-level guardians earn the right to become elders. Those who reach the top receive the title of Master. Alan frowns. He warns that the challenge is extremely dangerous and that he fears for his son's life. Besides, it's still too soon. Dale hasn't even reached the third circle yet. The boy counters by saying he'll get there soon. The Duke points out that normally, the third circle is only reached after the age of 20, and that even for someone already at the second circle, it's something extremely difficult. Dale holds his gaze steady. He says that this is the best path for his father and for House Saxon. By proving his worth at the Tower, the Duke's position will be strengthened by having a recognized heir, a real reputation, not one built on exaggerated rumors. Alan asks if that's the main reason. Dale confirms it is. The Duke gives a faint smile and says he understands. Dale promises he will prove his worth. A few days later, the scene shifts to the city of the dead, Necropolis. 3 figures approach a massive gate as a carriage arrives. Someone steps out of the vehicle, remarking that they've finally made it. Those present bow immediately, greeting the great Black Duke. Dale lets out a yawn, still a little tired from the journey. Noticing the exaggerated reverence, he realizes that once again they're going further than necessary in treating him with such formality. As soon as father and son arrive at the location, the people already there start whispering among themselves. They say the young man is a magic prodigy, but that he looks tired. Someone else mentions that his swordsmanship is on par with the Duke's knights. A blonde-haired young man named Velik speaks up and declares himself the top graduate of the academy, and therefore the only one who deserves to win the tower trial. A young woman approaches and bows, offering her respects to the Lord of the Tower. Her name is Eris. The Duke remarks that it's been a while since he last saw her. Eris is an elder of the Tower and serves as Secretary General, overseeing everything in the Black Duke's absence. Alan informs her that during the trial, she will be responsible for assisting Dale. The young man introduces himself to her politely, and Eris asks her lord to follow her. The elder explains that the 59 academy graduates are already waiting. When the door opens, the two take in the scene. A large group of competitors gathered and ready. Eris steps up to an elevated position, greets everyone, and introduces herself. She then explains the rules of the first floor of the Dark Magic Tower. Each participant must check the life point collar around their own neck. The trial works like a battle royale. Each collar has a protective shield and a single life point. Using the corpses scattered across the field to strike an opponent activates that opponent's shield and destroys their life point, eliminating them. Landing a valid hit earns 1 additional point. Reaching 3 points guarantees passage to the next floor. The use of artifacts is prohibited and results in immediate disqualification. Dale takes it all in and concludes that the rules were designed to weed out the weakest as quickly as possible. Meanwhile, someone nearby comments that the young lord has already reached the 3rd circle despite his age. Velik replies that's exactly why they'll take him down first. One of the participants asks whether attacking the young lord is allowed. The blonde smiles and says there's no reason to worry. The moment everyone stepped in there, they all became competitors on equal footing. The signal to begin the trial is given, and to everyone's surprise, all the participants aim their magic circles at Dale at the same time. One of the men channels energy into his arm, forms a purple sphere, and hurls it at the ground, summoning an undead. Others do the same. Demonic creatures emerge, spells are fired, and several monsters advance on the young man armed and ready. A zombie wielding a machete closes in fast and swings. Dale blocks with a shield, but it wasn't the shield that blocked the second attack. It was another undead that appeared out of nowhere and intercepted the strike with its own claws. No one caught when that summoning happened. While manipulating dark magic, Dale had also cast water magic across the battlefield without anyone noticing. The creature summoned by Dale charges forward and destroys one of the opponent's undead. The one who summoned it gets irritated, unable to understand how anyone dares destroy his creation. Dale's monster blocks every attack directed at it, and it's also covered in an ice armor created by the summoner himself, making it even more resilient. Velik steps forward and questions whether using water magic violates the rules. He argues that only dark magic, such as summoning and enhancing undead Panai, should be allowed. Dale turns to Eris and asks if there's any explicit prohibition on using other types of magic. The trial continues without interruption. Answer enough. Left with no other option, Velik orders his allies to hold back the undead while he goes after Dale directly. After all, he believes the numerical advantage will be enough against a single opponent. Dale quickly runs through the rules in his head. Artifacts prohibited. He has to work with what he has. A plan takes shape, risky but doable. The young man moves through the enemy field, weaving between the creatures. When he reaches a zombie armed with a knife, he gets dangerously close. For a moment it looks like he'll be hit, but he grabs the blade with one hand and with the other, channels magic directly into his fist. He wrenches the weapon from the zombie and hits it with an energy-charged punch. He looks at the knife in his hand for a second, then he starts using it. Velik and another participant are stunned to see an undead cut down so easily. They conclude the blade is no ordinary weapon. What they don't know is that Dale restructured the bones internally to increase the blade's durability. The battle continues. Dale moves through the field like a thunderbolt, cutting down opponents one after another with precise, rapid strikes. Velik watches, jaw dropped, as even his summoned soldiers fall one by one. To him, it makes no sense at all for a mage to be this skilled with a sword. With the soldiers out of the fight, Dale closes in on Velik. The blonde realizes there's no way out and starts to beg. Dale says it's not like he's actually going to die, and with a clean strike to the head, he ends the confrontation. Velik drops to the ground, knocked out. With his life points untouched, Dale is the only one to advance. He casts a confident look around. Pay attention, that was only the first step. The second phase of the tower trial begins. The objective now is to defeat the Guardian. The flesh, Golem. Normally, the survivors of the first phase would work together, but Dale eliminated everyone on his own, so he faces this challenge alone. Unlike the previous stage, all forms of magic are allowed. The use of artifacts, however, remains forbidden. The cloak is out of reach. Even so, it's a rare opportunity. Dale can finally test the third magic circle with everything he's got. The Golem attacks without hesitation. The punch comes down with brutal force, the impact echoing like thunder, and the creature smiles, certain it's over. Only then does it realize its own hand is wrapped in purple flames, burning without stop. The magic was already there, applied in silence before the blow even landed. The technique is called corrupt acceleration, a skill created by Dale himself, something extraordinarily rare for someone his age. Instead of killing the target outright, it corrodes them from the inside slowly. In his past life, Dale learned that against monsters, biological warfare was almost always the most effective strategy. Little by little, the smell of decay begins to rise from the Golem's body. Few there truly understand the terror of this kind of magic. Dale finishes the trial-breaking records all the way through the 10th phase. As a reward, he receives 4 days of rest and leaves every other participant in shock. The remaining 59 candidates go through a special reassessment while he has already moved on. That night, after everything, Dale stands by a fountain in silence. Then someone calls his name and he turns surprised. It's Sophia. She approaches him, praising his performance during the trial, and Dale replies that it was only possible because of what he learned from her. The master smiles, genuinely grateful. Dale calls her by name with a certain seriousness and makes an unexpected invitation. He asks if she would go out with him. There's a festival happening in the city, and he'd like to have company. Sophia hesitates for a moment, but agrees. With a slight flush on her face, she thinks there's nothing wrong with it, though she acknowledges that her student is still too young to fully understand what that moment means. The Necropolis Festival fills the streets with life and noise. Fireworks burst across the night sky. Sophia asks if he isn't tired after the trial, and Dale explains that he still has several days off before the next phase. A slightly awkward silence settles between them. The full moon shines bright, and the scenery is too beautiful to ignore. Sophia looks around with a quiet smile. Dale notices that keeping a conversation going with her was never easy, but it wasn't an uncomfortable silence. It had always been that way with his master, maybe because she had always trusted him. Days earlier, upon reaching the third magic circle, Dale faced exactly what Sophia had always warned him about, the mind space. While concentrating, blood began to drip from his nose. To transcend his own limits, he had to release mana beyond the capacity of the second circle, and only through the backflow would reaching the third be possible. Extremely difficult for anyone. For a child, nearly impossible. Dale felt the consequences in his chest, like a blade passing through his heart. He looked at the sword he held firmly, and suddenly his body was transported somewhere else. A desolate field covered in snow, bare trees scattered as far as the eye could see. Without understanding anything, he looked at his own hands and saw the appearance of his past life. It was the space inside his own mind. The inner world appeared broken and fragmented, split between who he was now and who he had been before. There was nothing there, only an endless void. And within that void, his master's hand was the only thing he could hold on to. Maybe that was why he wanted her to be part of that world so badly. Back in the present, gathering his courage, Dale says it all at once. He tells Master Sophia that he loves her. She stutters, caught off guard, unsure how to react. She asks him to repeat it. Even nervous, he does. Sophia looks at him with a calm, warm smile, and then pulls him into a gentle, sisterly embrace. She says she understands what he feels, and that she cares deeply about him too. Dale thanks her in silence, and thinks that having a second life really does have its advantages. A few days pass. The sun is already bright in the sky when the day of the Tower Challenge finally arrives. After the festival, nothing changed between them. His master probably still sees him as a child, with the innocent feelings of a 10-year-old. Dale decides to focus entirely on the trial. This time, the test is a magic duel. The winner advances to the next phase. Dale's opponent is Elbert Rosenheim, a master of the third circle, and the man makes it clear from the start that he won't go easy just because he's facing a child. In this phase, artifacts and magic are allowed without restriction, which means not even a protection amulet guarantees anyone's survival. With no limitations, Dale can finally show the difference in power between them. But before he can act, a purple aura surges in his direction. The magic explodes, opening a dense cloud like that of a bomb. Elbert warns that he's nothing like the students Dale faced before, and that this overconfidence will end right here. Several magic circles appear around the man, and from them, multiple arrows of darkness are fired in rapid succession. Elbert doubts his opponent can block all of them. Elbert readies another arrow and declares that's enough. Too much confidence for someone so inexperienced. He fires everything at once, curious to see if his opponent can take it. Dale doesn't block. block, he dodges. Every strike is avoided with precision, not a single movement wasted. Casting before the duel officially began was clearly an underhanded move, but the evaluators don't step in. They're too curious to see how far the boy will go. That's exactly the kind of thing that makes Dale unable to stand mages. Elbert grips his book firmly and, in a pompous, over-the-top display, summons a series of undead, demanding absolute loyalty. It's painful to watch. Even so, the man's abilities are clearly beyond anything Dale has faced before. The creatures advance. Dale evades everything with ease, showing no sign of effort. Elbert taunts him, asking how long he plans to just keep dodging, and whether he really thinks he can win that way. Another undead appears wielding an axe. A purple aura pierces straight through its neck. That same energy spreads and wipes out all the other creatures at once. Elbert is still smiling, still taunting, but the moment the undead are destroyed, they trigger a self-destruct. A massive explosion kicks up dust and blankets the entire arena. Convinced he's won, the mage declares his victory. Then he opens his eyes. His opponent is gone. Confused, Elbert looks around, asking when he even moved. Dale's voice echoes through the arena. Cheating against a child is about as cowardly as it gets, but the mage can't figure out where the sound is coming from. Suddenly, Dale appears behind him. He remarks that his opponent looks shocked, compliments him on the surprise attack, and begins closing in, wrapped in a spectral form. But he makes one thing clear. Elbert is still nowhere near beating him. Dark energy starts pinning the mage to the ground, threatening to consume him. Dale watches with a faint smile as the creatures draw closer, only warning them not to go too far. The spectators watch in horror, as if they're witnessing a nightmare. Elbert is twisted and dragged, on the verge of being devoured. Dale comments that the creatures might have gotten carried away from hunger. Desperate, the mage begs for his life. With a gesture, Dale forms a magic circle and orders them to stand down. Elbert collapses to the ground, unconscious. The first match is declared over. Dale puts his hands on his hips and asks who's next. Many give up on the spot, refusing to face what they just witnessed. By the final match, nearly everyone has withdrawn. Dale advances with ease, facing only one real fight along the way. After that, he fully refines all three of his magic circles and begins taking down the floor guardians one after another. By the time he reaches the 20th floor, a worthy opponent finally appears. The headless knight, mounted on its horse, created by an elder of the Black Tower. This being is unlike anything Dale has faced until now. This might be the young master's limit. Even so, Dale finds the idea of repeating obvious strategies boring. He faces the opponent charging in on horseback, and tension grips the spectators. Then something unexpected happens. The creature stops in front of him and kneels in reverence, as if standing before its true lord. Dale watches in silence, expression unreadable. In his inner world, only he and the knight remain. He gives the order, "End your own existence." Without hesitation, the guardian obeys. The blade passes through its own body, and the figure falls. Dale can barely believe it. The loyalty the creature showed in abandoning its creator doesn't seem like much to him, but the reaction around him says otherwise. The crowd is completely stunned. A creation abandoning its maker and swearing loyalty to another can only mean one thing. Dale has reached a level comparable to the Elder of the Black Tower himself. Satisfied, he decides to stop there. There's no need to go any further. The spectators question his decision, unable to understand. But Dale knows there's a line he shouldn't cross. Going beyond it would mean stepping into dangerous territory. The challenge comes to an end. The tower itself acknowledges the close of that journey. When the Duke arrives, everyone bows. The Black Tower pays its respects in his presence. Not just the nobles of House Saxon, but all the mages, elders included, lower their heads before the Duke and his heir. With the young master's extraordinary feats, the entire northern region begins, little by little, to unite. We're in the north of the Empire, in the Duchy of Saxon. A warrior charges forward with a spear in hand and takes down 2 orcs with precision. Another fighter raises his weapon and shouts that he fights for young Master Dale and for House Saxon. After completing the tower challenge, the protagonist was assigned by the Duke to lead an operation against the orc horde. Spearmen, warriors, and knights enter the battle under his command. An enormous responsibility for someone only 10 years old. Even so, no one doubts his ability. As the rightful heir of the Black Duke, Dale begins to unify the north. A blue sky covers the kingdom on a clear day. In the mission report, it's noted that 145 orcs were eliminated. The Duke asks about cavalry casualties, and the boy answers that only 3 soldiers suffered minor injuries. His father then asks whether magic was used to protect them. The answer comes firm. It was the sole merit of House Saxon's swords. With a satisfied smile, the Duke Duke congratulates his son. Helmut remarks that the young man has truly matured and has already settled into the role of commander. He was the one who taught Dale about swordsmanship, strategy, tactics, and the art of war. The day when the protagonist takes charge of his own territory isn't far off, and just thinking about it gets Dale excited. New challenges always motivate him. Meanwhile, Charlotte trains with intensity. She lets out a shout as she lunges forward, her blade cutting through the air toward her sparring partner's face. He dodges with ease and counters. She barely blocks it. Dale's speed has increased considerably, making his movements hard to follow. Even so, at one point, the tip of her sword passes dangerously close to his chin. Dale acknowledges that Charlotte has improved a lot. She replies that when he talks like that, he sounds like a different person, which draws a laugh from him as he asks if he's been teasing her too much. Charlotte then brings up that ever since Dale reached the 3rd magic circle and passed the 20th tower trial, everyone has been treating him differently, always flattering him. She asks if that doesn't bother him. Smiling, he tells her to relax and says that she'll become strong soon enough too. Considering Charlotte is only 10 years old, her talent is impressive, but she doesn't appreciate the comment at all. Annoyed, she tells him not to treat her like a child. Dale fires back that she is one. The blonde points a finger at his face and reminds him that Dale is one too. Surprised, he points to himself and questions it. Then he declares that he already considers himself an adult. Charlotte decides to put an end to that pointless argument. Sometime later, Helmut meets with his student and announces that the day's lesson will be special. Dale will learn the hammer and anvil tactic. The cavalry advances on both flanks, circles around the enemy, and surrounds them, while the infantry keeps the front line occupied. The name comes from the act of forging metal, pressed between the hammer and the anvil, with no way out. Dale realizes this strategy is only viable thanks to the Black Cavalry, and deep down, understands that the nature of war never changes. Taking the opportunity, the young man changes the subject and asks about Charlotte's progress. Helmut explains that her training can't be compared to the boys, but that she has been doing well. Her foundation as a swordswoman is solid, and before long, she'll be able to learn the Saxon family's aura techniques. Even so, there's something that concerns him. Dale quickly figures it out: compatibility with the family's style. Just as mages refine mana through magic circles, knights refine aura through internal training. Among the great orders are the Black Cavalry, which operates in wars, and the Order of the Knight Raven, tied to the north, which prioritizes strength and power. The problem is that Charlotte's style is built around speed. Even with great talent, she may reach the level of the 7th sword, but perhaps never make it to the top. Her father once held one of those elite positions, recognized throughout the kingdom for his exceptional skill. Dale brings up the spring sword and reflects that if that style still existed, everything would be different. However, the technique was completely lost with the fall of the ancient knights. The question lingers: did that style truly vanish from the world? While Dale works hard to build his reputation through battles and duties, the moment comes to prove the results of his training. During a meeting, the Duke questions a piece of information just received. A messenger reports that Baron Fokker, lord of a neighboring territory, is claiming ownership of a copper mine and has formally issued a domain war request. It seems reckless for a lesser noble to directly challenge a power like Saxon, but there's more at stake. If they refuse to hand over the mine and accept the war, the Grand Duke of Brandenburg may ally with the Baron in exchange for a share of the resources, and there's a strong chance the Order of St. Madalena will be mobilized. That thought leaves Dale visibly uneasy. Everything points to the enemy not having forgotten the humiliation they suffered before. A new confrontation is about to begin. From that fateful day on, Count Brandenburg carried his desire for revenge like an open wound. Starting a direct war was too risky, so he chose to act in a border region, a strategic point where he wouldn't need to expose himself. Dale approached his father and made his request without beating around the bush. He wanted to personally lead the battle alongside the Saxon knights. The Duke refused on the spot. He said it was still too soon, and warned that a war against humans was something completely different from subduing monsters. The boy needed to watch his words more carefully. Turning to the messenger, the Duke reassured Baron Greenbelt, guaranteeing that the mine would be protected. The man thanked him, visibly relieved, but still on edge. Sometime later, Dale vented to Helmut, saying he was certain he would do better than anyone else. The knight acknowledged the frustration, but said the Duke surely had his reasons. Then, to change the subject, he revealed he had prepared something special for that day's training and pulled out a board game. Dale quickly realized it was something like chess, though it went by a different name in that world. Helmut explained that the game had been created based on real battles and that its rules were quite complex. But if the boy truly wanted to learn strategy at a deep level, it would be a great opportunity. Dale grabbed the board and ran off. Helmet stood there, unable to make sense of the reaction. Moments later, the boy appeared before his father with the board in hand and a straightforward proposal. If he won a match, he wanted permission to take part in the territorial war. He argued that war wasn't just about strength, it was about strategy, and he asked to be judged on those terms. Helmet tried to step in and apologize for the situation, but the Duke cut him off and accepted the challenge. If the boy won, he would take part in the war. If he lost, he would drop the idea for good. The match began. Helmet watched every move closely, and as the turns went on, he noticed something unexpected. The young boy was playing far better than anyone had imagined. At the end of an intense contest, Dale won 2-1, even with the Duke having held the advantage in numbers and positioning. Confident, the boy asked whether the promise would be kept. His father laughed and wanted to know how long his son had known that game. Dale answered calmly that he had found a book in the library years ago and had been studying it ever since. It was a convenient excuse, and nothing more. The Duke stood up and declared that a promise was a promise. In his name, he was entrusting his son with command of the knights in the upcoming battle. But he gave a serious warning. With Saxon's honor on the line, defeat was not an option. Then he looked the boy straight in the eye and asked whether he could truly bear the weight of that responsibility. Dale answered without hesitation. He asked for trust. His father accepted and said he looked forward to seeing the results of all that training. At Malbert Castle, residence of Grand Duke Brandenburg, the tension was plain to see. Brandenburg was speaking with Philip about the rumors that Saxon's heir would personally lead the knights. Confused, he questioned what that drunk and irresponsible boy was trying to accomplish. Philip responded with contempt. The enemy was nothing more than a small group, and he asked for authorization to crush the arrogant young fool. Brandenburg slammed his hand on the table and cut him off. Furious, he said Philip was underestimating the opponent in the most absurd way possible. That boy was a monster, someone that Brandenburg's own son wouldn't be able to match in 10 years, let alone 100. Consumed by anger, he called Philip useless and lamented not having acted sooner regarding Charlotte. Even so, he decided to hand Philip the command of the battle, but only in appearance. In practice, the one leading would be Deputy Lord Milvas. Philip's role would be purely symbolic. The Duke ordered Milvas to keep his son away from any real danger. Deep down, Brandenburg knew he couldn't directly confront a child under those conditions, and he was beginning to suspect that all of this had been part of Duke Saxon's plan from the very beginning. Meanwhile, Helmet and Dale were celebrating their victory in the game. A few days later, at Greenbelt Castle, a large gate swung open. The Baron in charge of the mine was visibly nervous as soldiers in heavy armor approached. The arrival of the young commander was announced, and some of those present were taken aback by the boy's age, quietly wondering whether he could even wield a sword. The Baron tried to project confidence, saying that Dale's presence was reassuring. Inside, however, he was uneasy. Sending a 10-year-old boy to command the cavalry seemed far too risky. Trying to buy some time, he suggested they head to a banquet first. Dale refused immediately. He said there was no time to waste, and the answer caught the host off guard. Without further ceremony, the boy brought his sword close to the Baron's neck and declared that his priority was to inspect the soldiers. Then he asked a direct question. Out of everyone present, who was the strongest? A red-haired warrior cuts the conversation short and introduces himself as the strongest one there. With a scar marking his face, he declares with arrogance that no one capable of taking him down has been born yet. But deep down, the boy's confidence unsettles him more than he'd like to admit. Dale watches the man with a wary eye. Beside him, the Baron feels a wave of relief as the blade finally pulls away from his neck. The young man reads the situation clearly. Everyone there doubts him, and it's not hard to understand why. A decisive battle has been placed in the hands of a 10-year-old. Without hesitating, he strikes his sword against the ground. He declares that the doubt goes both ways. If they question his ability, he questions the competence of the Baron's troops, and the best way to settle that is with a blade. A cold smile crosses his face as he points out the obvious. The territory's strongest knight is drunk. That alone says everything about the level of those troops. The red-haired warrior draws his sword, furious. He points the blade at Dale and, with a slightly tense voice, declares his name, Hayberk, and stakes his honor as a knight to prove the barony's strength. Dale keeps smiling. The two lock eyes as tension fills the air. Dale asks if Hayberk has ever heard of his sword. The red-haired man says he knows the reputation of that unusual blade well and wonders in silence whether there's some trick behind all that confidence. But before the doubt can be resolved, Hayberk charges at full speed, swinging his sword with everything he has. The strike is blocked by Dale's hand, held in place by magic. Neither the impact nor the young mage's confidence waver. Only Hayberk does. With a push backward, the attack is completely neutralized. Dale studies his opponent. The sword carries no aura, a technique exclusive to high-level knights. Even so, he decides to respond in a way that matches someone fighting with everything they've got. A magic circle begins to form in his left hand. Haberk tenses at the sight of dark energy rising from the ground, closing in fast. He tries to cut through the shadows with his sword, but the strikes have no effect. The pressure builds, his focus starts to crack. Meanwhile, Dale keeps control of the circle and watches carefully. His opponent's skill is far more limited than it appeared. Then something happens that catches even Dale off guard. Haberk cries out in pain and collapses to the ground, defeated. The fall is as quick as it is unexpected. It's hard to believe that the soldier considered the strongest in the region was taken down in a matter of moments. The Baron panics. He demands to know how Dale had the nerve to incapacitate such an important man on the eve of a decisive battle. Dale steps closer and responds coldly. At that level of skill, House Saxon will have to carry the battle on its own, and it's not fair for the Baron to watch comfortably while others die for him. If that is the territory's strongest knight, the situation is critical. House Saxon would never hesitate to protect those who swore loyalty, but that doesn't excuse negligence. Everyone needs to do their part. He then declares that until the battle begins, his knights will be the sword for everyone there, and that a choice needs to be made right now: follow him or lose everything, including their homes, in the next battle. One by one, the soldiers begin to kneel. In unison, they swear absolute loyalty to the young commander. Sometime later, night falls. Helena lies down, clearly worried, while the Duke tries to calm her, running his hand across her face. He says their son has far more than what meets the eye, and that the future waiting for him is something even hard to imagine. With a calm smile, he reaffirms his confidence. He believes the young man is destined to rule that world. In his room, Dale reflects. Before, he was like a frog at the bottom of a well, too limited to see beyond it. Now he understands that clearly. He also suspects that the sacred swordsman already knew the state of the territory, and that the choice of that barony was intentional. The next day, the sun is already high with few clouds in the sky. Haberk appears carrying an enormous rock on his back, exhausted, begging to stop. Another soldier scolds him on the spot, calls it weakness, and orders him to keep going. In the distance, Dale watches it all in silence. He notices that, even at the start of training, the red-haired man is already struggling. There's still a lot of work ahead to raise the level of the Greenbelt Barony's knights. On top of that, he decides it will be necessary to send a messenger to the Pucker Barony to propose a negotiation. It's not about accepting a humiliating peace, but before entering the battle, there's someone he needs to meet. Some time passes. The scene shifts to the negotiation site on the border between the two baronies. A long table sits at the center of the space. Dale takes his seat at the head of it, posture steady, quietly sizing up the situation. In his head, the math is already done. Within a few weeks, something inevitable is going to happen. The Order of St. Madalena is far away, on an expedition across the continent, limited supplies and a high chance of a preemptive strike. Not to mention that Baron Parker's cavalry forces shouldn't be underestimated. A messenger announces the arrival of young Master Philip. Dale had already expected this. He knew exactly who they would send. Philip walks in full of himself, a commander in name only. At his side, silent, walks the real leader of the battle, Milvas. When the young man sits down, Dale greets him. Philip responds with a sarcastic smile, extending his hand and taunting. After everything, they still came to negotiate? Scared of a real war? Dale doesn't flinch. He gets straight to the point and asks why they accepted the negotiation proposal. When Philip opens his mouth to answer, Dale cuts him off. The question wasn't for him. He makes it clear he isn't talking to a decorative puppet. He's talking to the real commander present, Milvas, known as the Sword of Chastity. The discomfort is immediate. Both of them show irritation, but Dale holds firm. He states that the Holy Swordsman would never entrust a battlefield to someone incompetent. Milvas tries to keep things under control and asks Philip not to let himself be provoked. But something bothers him deeply. How does the enemy know something as sensitive as the Count's contempt for his own son? And yet Dale threw it on the table without hesitating. Milvas declares the negotiation is over. Philip slams the table, demanding a quick decision. Dale keeps pushing. He asks if Philip needs permission just to speak, and compares his posture to that of an obedient slave. He suggests that the real control isn't in Philip's hands, but in Milvas's, as if the dog had put the collar on the owner. The knight tries to step in once more, but the irritation has already taken over the room. Dale watches it all with satisfaction. He leans back in his chair, puts his hands behind his head, and keeps provoking, savoring the tension he just created between the two. Then he reveals his true intention. There was never any real interest in negotiating. It was all a strategy to destabilize the enemy's chain of command. Dale calls for Bale and asks Milvas to step out for a moment. The long-haired man leaves the room. With a friendly smile, Dale suggests the two of them talk alone. After all, they're the supreme commanders responsible for this battle. It makes sense for them to deal with each other directly. The irritation on Philip's face is plain to see. Even so, with a firm voice, the blonde seems to have taken the bait. He orders Milvas to leave immediately. The knight tries to change his superior's mind, but Philip doesn't budge. Deep down, he knows he may have just walked into Dale's trap. Without much choice, Milvas obeys. Now alone with the irritated enemy, Dale says he only asked for this meeting to negotiate, that he has a condition capable of convincing Philip. The proposal is simple. If the Order of Knights of St. Madalena gives up the battle and withdraws now, the Saxon family will provide the supplies needed for the return. Philip stands up and slams the table. He calls that a pathetic condition, not a negotiation. Dale apologizes if he offended him earlier, but repeats the request. If the troops don't pull back, they will be wiped out, and the holy swordsman's reputation and the young master's name will be dragged through the mud. This may be Philip's last chance to save his honor. Philip stands up and says Milvas was right. The brat just wanted to mock him from the start. Dale smiles with sarcasm. He says it's a shame the boy thinks that way, because this would have been his real last chance. After all, the one who loses this battle and takes the blame for the defeat won't be Milvas. It will be the Count's family's incompetent, useless son. Philip lets out a wicked smile. He says that's nothing, and that the days of an arrogant brat like Dale are numbered. Dale smiles back and says he hopes the blonde holds on to that confidence for a long time. Some time passes since the failed negotiation. In Baron Greenbelt's territory, Philip questions his soldiers about the enemy's movements. One of them reports that the Saxon family's knights have started to move. Philip thinks it over. He remembers Dale's gaze and composure during the negotiation. Even being a child, that boy didn't have the face of a beginner. But that's exactly where the opportunity lies. While Dale is still 10 years old, Philip can cut the problem out at the root once and for all. Fired up, he orders his soldiers that they are going to teach that child what silence means. On the other side, Dale's informant warns him that the enemy has started advancing north. Dale moves his arm while gripping his sword and tells his soldiers that the moment has come. Today, they will show why they are worthy of that name. The battle begins. One of the soldiers sounds the instrument, giving the signal to advance, and the armies move at the same time, men charging toward the enemy from every direction. The field fills with screams and clashing weapons, and the first casualties fall within the opening moments. The blonde watches the situation and orders the first cavalry to advance. The main objective is to hold back the Night Raven Knight's order and the Saxon family's forces. Even so, his troops don't fully know the power of that order, so he decides to position himself at the center of the formation, away from the front line. Baron Parker's troops advance through the left flank with the mission of pinning down Greenbelt's cavalry movements, while Brandenburg's elite prepares a flanking attack aimed directly at the enemy's main force. It's risky, but morale is high. No one can let this opportunity slip away. Melvin knows just how dangerous this move is. The enemy warriors are determined to fight for the Count's family, and the chaos on the field already proves it. In the middle of the confusion, something unexpected happens. A presence appears at the front line, and the soldiers step back, not out of fear, but surprise. Young Master Dale has personally advanced onto the field. His voice cuts through the noise of weapons, ordering no one to retreat, that they fight to the end for the Saxon family. With him there, the soldiers' confidence reignites on the spot. The blonde watches from a distance and understands the strategy. Dale wants to decide the battle with a direct confrontation from the start, offering himself as bait. But that doesn't bother him. It was exactly what he expected. Raising his hand, he shouts in the name of St. Madalena, and his soldiers push forward with even greater force. On the other side, Dale's men respond with the same intensity, shouting for no one to get near the commander. The forces collide with everything they have, and bursts of magic take over the field. The blonde decides to act. A fast battle demands a fast decision. He orders the first cavalry to follow him. The goal is to defeat the young master and end the war right there. With hatred in his eyes, he declares that this will be the day he proves the true worth of the elite. With the drive of a killer, he charges across the field. His strikes are lethal, cutting down enemies one after another. A soldier appears ahead wielding a spear and screaming. The blade comes dangerously close to the blonde's neck. Just barely, the attack is intercepted, and his sword cuts down the opponent before the blow can land. He keeps pushing forward, consumed by his own determination. But after taking down several opponents, he starts to feel the fatigue. And along with it, a strange feeling. Something isn't right. Even as he presses the enemy elite with overwhelming force, the Night Raven Order falls back far too easily. The black cavalry shouldn't be reacting like this. The unease doesn't go away. A messenger rushes over with urgent news. Baron Parker, responsible for the left flank, is being defeated without any chance to resist. Elsewhere on the field, soldiers are dropping one after another. Greenbelt's troops are using aura. Baron Parker's lines are breaking, and the soldiers are desperately waiting for a decision. The commander hesitates for a moment. The young enemy's words echo in his mind, about the responsibility that would fall on an incompetent heir. Another messenger arrives with a plan. Gather the central and rear cavalry to reinforce the left flank. The reaction is immediate. Irritated, the blonde tells everyone to shut up. Then he orders the rear cavalry to be gathered under his command, but with a different objective. He intends to attack through the right flank and push straight to eliminate the real target, the young enemy commander. The problem is that Dale is already leading the rear toward the field. The situation grows complicated. Sending more troops could compromise mobility, and the left flank becomes more vulnerable by the minute, but the decision has already been made. Blinded by the obsession to win, the blonde ignores the calls for help. The enemy's encirclement begins to close in, and the messengers plead for a retreat. The order doesn't come. It's not the moment yet, according to the commander. Then he looks back and finds the real reason behind all of this. Dale is there, watching, with the look of someone who has already won. That look only fuels Philip's fury further. He raises his sword and calls his cavalry. The soldiers, confused, watch the movement and begin desperately calling for orders. Philip closes his eyes for a moment. In the name of Saint Madalena, he makes his proclamation, invoking blessings, protection, and victory, asking that the love and mercy of the sister goddesses be with them. When his eyes open, they are filled with pure hatred. The decision is made. From this moment on, they will break through the enemy lines and bring back the head of the opposing general. With a shout, he orders everyone to advance, swords in hand, to the very end if necessary. Milvus's troops advance toward Dale, exactly as the young man expected. The blonde's men appear from behind, trying to close the encirclement. Dale stays calm. He knows that anxiety and fear distort judgment, and at that moment, there was no room for either. With a faint edge of mockery, he asks if the enemy had never seen magic before. A moment later, he fires an ice arrow that cuts through the air and strikes a soldier's horse dead on, bringing the animal down hard and sending the rider's head crashing into the ground. The blonde's eyes go wide. Hitting a moving target with that kind of precision wasn't something you saw every day, and he knew it. Then comes Dale's order. From the ground, a wall of ice rises up, completely blocking the enemy's advance. The soldiers hesitate, thrown off by the sudden barrier. Without giving them time to react, the command rings out again. Advance. The troops obey immediately, charging forward with everything they have, shouting that they'll give their lives if needed and will be their young master's shield. The enemy line starts to crumble, soldiers falling one after another. On the other side, the blonde brings a hand to his head, lost. He realizes too late that he was led straight into that trap. The strategy was never to take him down right away. It was to isolate, pressure, and break the formation. And he walked right into it. His entire front line was twisted into an unnatural shape. With no other options, he decides to push forward. If he can break through everything, maybe he can still turn things around. With a shout, he smashes through the wall and finally reaches his target. He raises his sword, determined to end it all right there. But on the other side, there's no fear, just a calm smile, a crash, then silence. When the dust settles, the outcome is clear. The blonde is on his knees, and the survivors around him do the same. The battlefield belongs to the young commander. The old confidence in the superiority of Aura Knights proves to be flawed. The doctrine that was once a strength now reveals itself as a weakness. Dale already knew every move, every pattern, all of it stored in his memory from a past life when the man watching over him commanded those very same troops. A messenger rushes over, out of breath. The left flank has fallen, and Commander Baron Parker has been captured. The blonde still tries to make sense of it and asks if all of this was planned from the start. The answer comes calmly. Dale says the battlefield is chaotic, and no one can predict everything, but destroying yourself is a choice. Then he lays out the terms. Those who want to live can beg and earn mercy in exchange for a few gold coins. Indignation spreads through the soldiers. They say they'd rather die than submit. A snap of fingers cuts through the air. A soldier's body drops with a spear driven straight through his heart. The message is clear. Dale looks at the blonde and asks the final question. What will his choice be? For a few seconds, only silence. Then, slowly, the commander lowers his head and acknowledges defeat, swallowing every last bit of his pride.
He says he has no regrets about losing his life, but he has a duty to warn his fellow knights that this boy is truly very dangerous. At the top of his lungs, he orders all his soldiers to get on their knees. Even in surrender, he demands to be treated fairly, as a prisoner, following imperial tradition. Dale takes in the scene, his enemy on his knees begging for his own life.
He realizes there's no longer any reason for taunting. Even so, a faint smile appears, and the verdict comes, no. No one there will survive. With an almost innocent look, he gives the order to kill them all. Even the Nightcrow Knights are caught off guard. By imperial custom, the normal thing would be to spare the captured in exchange for ransom. But the young man's voice was absolute and firm enough to leave no room for doubt. On that field, there was only one will, and it could not be challenged. Among everyone there, one person was destined for their own destruction. Consumed by rage, the blonde no longer sees any point in staying on his knees and rises, ready to attack, but he doesn't have time. A blade pierces his abdomen in an instant, and the soldier's spears reach him before he can even get close. Dale moves closer and speaks right next to his ear. He asks, in a cold voice, if Lord Milvas remembers Dale's death. In the protagonist's mind, that night comes back. The scene is burned in, impossible to forget. The blade driven into the boy's back, and someone watching it all in silence. It was him, present at the execution of the imprisoned hero. Holding the enemy's head, Dale repeats the question. Desperation takes over the blonde's expression. He remembers, but before he can react, a dark energy begins to wrap around them both. He realizes too late that this person should never have been alive. The darkness holds him in place, and his body is taken over without any chance to fight back. With a smile heavy with irony, the final answer comes. Just one word, yes. Dale takes a deep breath. He feels a relief he hadn't felt in a long time. Meanwhile, in another part of the battlefield, the deaths keep coming. The blonde watches his men fall one by one. Disbelief takes over his expression, and by the time he finally understands, the battle is already lost. The right flank was crushed. Sir Milvas and the Aura Knights have fallen. The left flank had been broken long ago. Now, the Black Cavalry closes in around the main force. In the defeated commander's mind, only one thing remains, the boy's mocking smile. A desperate soldier begs for a decision, but pride speaks louder. The blonde repeats, almost in denial, that this cannot be a defeat. He orders everyone to fight to the end, to hold their ground, that the Order of Knights must never kneel. The men hesitate. Pushing forward would mean total annihilation. Even so, the answer comes loaded with hatred. No one disobeys the Supreme Commander. But chaos has already taken over the field. An enemy appears from the side, and the blonde panics, screaming for protection. Deep down, Philip didn't want to die there. He wanted a different end. Time passes, the sky turns orange, and the battle comes to a close. The soldiers celebrate. From start to finish, everything followed young Master Dale's plan. Captured and restrained, Philip struggles and shouts to be released, while the victor watches him in silence. Dale can clearly see how much the other man rejects the idea of surrendering. Even in defeat, Philip insists, they may have lost, but they were not broken. He admits with contempt that he tried to survive at others' expense. As a commander, that was his duty. The young man reaches for his sword. If the battle is over, there's no reason to keep him alive. In a last act of desperation, Philip proposes a duel to decide the battle's outcome. A soldier reacts, finding it absurd, but Dale gestures for them to let him speak, and he accepts, with a crooked smile. The blonde starts to draw his sword, but doesn't wait. Before the fight even begins, he charges forward, trying to exploit an opening. Deep down, he had already counted on his rival accepting. He raises his blade, screaming for his opponent to prepare to die. He doesn't come close. From the ground, a dark energy rises and cuts the strike short. Philip's expression shifts instantly, from confidence to pure despair. His body drops and begins to writhe on the ground, screaming and begging to be saved. Dale watches. There is no empathy in his gaze, only contempt, and so that loud war ends with the pathetic scream of a cowardly man. Sometime later, trumpets echo to mark the arrival of someone important. Young Master Dale returns victorious. The common folk comment that the boy surrounded and completely annihilated the Order of the Knights of St. Madalena, but not everyone is celebrating. A hooded figure approaches and says, "This is no cause for celebration. Many lives were lost that day, and in all likelihood, God did not wish for this outcome." The voice behind those words reveals itself as Cardinal Nikolai of the Church of the Goddess Sistina, and warns that this child's blade may not hesitate to be turned against allies. The protagonist approaches a large door, with Bale at his side. A sweet voice echoes through the corridor, calling out for her big brother. It's Lisa, Dale's younger sister, visibly more grown up. The two embrace warmly, and the young man smiles, asking if she missed him. Shortly after, Helmut approaches and congratulates him on the victory in his first battle. Hand in hand with his sister, Dale enters the hall. Familiar faces wait for him. His master Safia, Charlotte, and further ahead before the altar, his parents watching him with pride. Placing his hand over his heart, the young man formally presents himself to deliver the victory report to the Duke. Alan responds with satisfaction, saying the battle was conducted flawlessly, and thanks Bale for helping guide the heir. Helena, with a gentle smile, says the boy must be exhausted after returning from war, and allows him to rest before anything else. The young man thanks her. His face is radiant. It had been a long time since he was last there, and now that place truly felt like home. Meanwhile, far away, another scene unfolds. Brandenburg trembles with rage. Surviving soldiers approach, visibly worn down, and the Count demands answers. He wants to know where Philip is. The answer comes loaded with tension. Sir Milvas fell in combat. The Order of St. Madalena was completely destroyed. Soldiers were captured, and an outrageous ransom was demanded. With a sharp voice, the Count asks whether this was a crushing defeat followed by a shameful retreat. If that's the case, they had better be prepared for the consequences. Without hesitation, he orders both of them taken to the cellar, where they will beg for death. The battle that day earned a name, the Black and White War. Over time, the stories only grew, and from then on, a new title begins to take shape. Dale comes to be known as the young Black Master who shows no mercy. Time passes and the boy turns 11. At the official birthday ceremony, he is named Viscount of the Duchy of Saxon. The young man's eyes go wide. The title is not merely symbolic. A Viscount carries real authority and can act as the Lord's direct representative. Overjoyed, Dale gives his thanks. But he quickly shifts his tone, because there is something he wants to do. Even if it seems sudden, as the Duke's representative, he wants to make a decision. Comments about the last battle still echo, that the young Black Master spared no one. Some knights, guided by the faith of the goddess Church, ended up falling victim to his cruelty. That would not go unnoticed. The Church would certainly not be pleased. For that reason, the young man wants to set out on a pilgrimage to the papal territory of the goddess Sistina and, with his own hands, face the weight of the reputation he has built. The Duke listens to his son's proposal with a closed expression, giving nothing away. He says he can't understand that decision. Fear is a valuable resource, hard to replace, and yet the boy intends to give it up just to please the Church. The young man responds calmly. There is a force worth that risk. Alan, curious, asks if there's another plan behind this. The protagonist confirms it. He intends to put forward a proposal that can't be refused, and on top of that, get his hands on forbidden grimoires. A few days earlier, while he slept, the young man began to feel something was wrong. It was as if forgotten memories were forcing their way back to the surface. Suddenly, a massive skull appeared before him, staring him down with a question. Did he remember their deaths? The next instant, a violent pain tore through him, and words echoed in his mind. He woke up abruptly, breathing hard, hand pressed to his chest. That was no ordinary dream. It was something deeper, tied to the darkest corner of his own mind, which was forced open when he reached the third magic circle, and what he found there wasn't control. It was loneliness. The young man understood he was still not enough. He needed more power, more control. Just as a knight masters his sword, a truly exceptional mage needs a grimoire. Sometime later, a carriage travels far from the kingdom. The border between Barony Greenbelt and Barony Parker marks the end of the Empire's northern region and the beginning of the Central Zone. After the defeat in the war, the fallen baron was left with only one way out: banditry. Arrows cut through the air without warning. They barely miss the horses, which stir nervously. Armed men appear blocking the road, demanding to know what the travelers are doing there. According to them, it's common knowledge that you pay a toll to cross noble lands. The young man responds without showing any concern. He had already prepared a sum for this. One of the men smirks, takes the bag, and confirms by the weight. It's full of gold, far too generous for a simple toll. Satisfied, the bandits let the carriage through. The carriage moves on. The men laugh among themselves, convinced they came out ahead, already scheming something bigger. The calm doesn't last. Further ahead, a voice calls out from above, ordering them to stop. The Baron himself appears with all his arrogance and questions how they dare cross his territory without paying. Bale responds calmly. The amount had already been handed over to his subordinates, and charging twice is against the law. The men around them deny everything. They say they've never seen these travelers before, that this is the first time they've met, and that the ones breaking the law are the travelers, not the bandits. The Baron warns that if they still value their lives, they should hand over everything they have. One of the soldiers adds with pride, they are standing before the famous hero who survived to the very end of the Black and White War, the hero of the turning point. The carriage slows to a stop. From inside, the young man begins to laugh. Pulling back his hood, he looks the Baron in the eye and asks with genuine curiosity if that is really the so-called hero of the turning point. The noble looks closely, and his eyes go wide when he recognizes who is standing before him. Bale also pulls back his hood, and in that moment everyone realizes the two are no ordinary travelers. The Baron takes a deep breath and tries to regain control quickly. There are only two of them. It's still a fight he can win. With forced confidence, he orders the archers to ready their arrows. Bale, steady at the young man's side, asks for the order. The protagonist, completely calm, says the performance ends here. Without hesitating, the Baron points his finger and orders the attack. The arrows cut through the air at full speed. The protagonist doesn't move, eyes fixed on the projectiles closing in. Then the swordsman acts, deflecting every one of them with precise movements, gripping the blade firmly. He declares he will carry out the order with everything he has. The archers freeze, unable to believe what they just saw, but there's no time to react. The Guardian moves forward, and the first strike lands clean on one of their arms. He keeps advancing without hesitation, taking on all of them alone. The Baron watches the scene, powerless. His confidence vanishes completely. When the young man approaches, the man has no choice left. He drops to his knees and begs for forgiveness, voice trembling. The protagonist simply looks at him and asks coldly why he should do that. And so the young man continues on his way, passing through countless corrupt nobles, fallen knights, and bandits scattered across the continent. A few weeks later, a small vessel cuts through calm waters. Beside his loyal companion, the young man finally draws close to his destination, the papal territory of the goddess Sistina, the grand constellation city of Quest. He looks at that place with an expression of contempt. He called this a pilgrimage, but deep down he knows very well it isn't a visit, it's a judgment. The young man and his companion approach the entrance, guarded by two heavily armed soldiers. Before the great door, the protagonist stops and faces it with a steady gaze. As they enter, the hall that opens before them is magnificent. Stained glass windows scatter light into patterns that seem almost divine, and imposing statues watch everything in silence. At the center of the space, waiting for their arrival, stands His Eminence, Cardinal Nikolai, a sixth circle white mage and one of the 12 clerics who occupy the absolute top of the goddess church. With a calm expression, the clergyman remarks that he heard about the battle, and that many lives were lost. He mentions the sacrifice of the brothers of Santa Maddalena as something deeply regrettable. The protagonist responds calmly that he regrets it as well. His poor judgment cost more than it should have, and that is why he decided to conceal his position and come personally to the papal territory on a pilgrimage as a way of seeking redemption. He hopes his feelings reach the goddess. The cardinal watches the boy carefully. To him it makes sense. The weight of war must have been too heavy for someone so young. After all, he is still just an 11-year-old boy, and that makes everything simpler. In a serene tone, the man declares that the goddess's mercy is open to all, and that there is no sin in this world that cannot be forgiven. The young man is silent for a moment. Then Dale asks again if that is really true, if there is no unforgivable sin. The clergyman confirms without hesitation, and the boy raises his gaze and asks if that is why he sold the goddess's country to the empire. Silence falls like a blade. Caught off guard, the cardinal laughs and calls it an absurd joke, but the protagonist does not back down. He explains that before the papal state was forcibly annexed, 12 cardinals convinced the former pope to accept the deal. Nikolai was present that day, but the former leader refused until the very end, and as a consequence, he was betrayed and eliminated. With the help of the White Tower and the cardinals themselves, the pope was brought down by the empire's hunting dogs. Dale concludes coldly, "Has that sin already been forgiven?" The clergyman's expression shifts. His teeth clench. The calm disappears. With clear anger, the cardinal fires back. The visitor came seeking redemption, yet dares to speak forbidden truths and still expects mercy. Something utterly ridiculous. The young man holds his ground. He responds firmly that he was not sent to judge the church. All he wants is the price of a small silence. Eliminating a mere representative of the Duke would solve nothing. But deep down, Dale knows that is not even true. The Duke does not even know what is happening here. Taking in the situation, the cardinal closes his eyes. A luminous energy begins to surround his body and the air grows heavy. In a more controlled voice, he asks directly what the boy wants. Without hesitation, the protagonist answers, "Beneath the apostolic palace, there is a secret library where the church's forbidden books are sealed." That is where he wants to go. The so-called Hell Library, where the most dangerous grimoire in the world lies dormant, known as the Book of the Black Goat. The young man descends dark stairs, lighting the way as he moves forward. Each step echoes in the heavy silence of that place. The terms were set before he came down. Only he may enter and leave the Hell Library. The church will not interfere in whatever happens inside. inside, and he is only allowed to take a single grimoire. In exchange, the young man must swear eternal silence over the church's shame. The protagonist accepted without hesitation. As heir to the Black Duke, he made his oath in the name of Satis. The two joined hands, and a pure white energy rose around them, as if a divine entity were sealing the agreement. The cardinal declared he would take both their hearts as collateral. That was how they bound the pact through the contract magic Gaius, the pride of the White Tower. There is no going back. If either one breaks the agreement, the contract itself will destroy their hearts. With the pact sealed, the young man continues alone until he finally stands before the gate of hell. On the door, a phrase is carved: "Those who enter must abandon all hope." The boy places his hand on the surface. As if responding to his presence, the gate opens on its own. That stirs his curiosity. It is no wonder they call this place hell. What lies beyond the entrance is not a simple library. It is a vast dungeon, and the so-called forbidden books are, in truth, sources of calamity. For a mage, a grimoire is worth as much as a sword to a knight. Seeking a powerful one is only natural. In one of the corridors, the young man encounters the Guardians, creatures made from bodies used to protect that place. An irony: those who preach the light are not so different when they need power, using corpses all the same. Without warning, the Guardians advance. The protagonist reacts instantly, drives them all back with magic, and presses on. Inside, there is no need to hide anything. He can use his full power, and that makes him feel free. With a decisive motion, the boy takes a dagger and cuts his own hand. Dark liquid flows as the ritual begins. In a firm voice, Dale declares his name and lineage, invoking something ancient on the floor of that dungeon. He calls upon the black goat of the forest of 1,000 descendants, demanding it fulfill the contract with the clan of darkness. The surroundings react immediately. A distorted voice rises, saying that this fluid carries immense power, that it belongs to a true mage, and accepts the call. But then another voice cuts in, then another and another. Multiple presences manifest at once, all competing for that contract, fighting for the chance to be chosen. The scene around him shifts, and a suffocating atmosphere takes hold of the place. Then a hooded figure appears before him. The entity proposes a contract, promising to destroy all enemies and bring a true festival of death against anyone who stands in the way. Looking out at that warped landscape, the young man begins to understand where he is. The mental world of a grimoire called the Book of Massacre, a forbidden tome built upon countless lost lives, carrying within it the essence of a cruel and boundless magic. Even so, he doesn't hesitate. Firmly, he orders the creature before him to stand aside. That's not what he's looking for. The entity rages at the rejection, but the young man just smiles without any sign of fear and makes it clear he's not the one trapped here. His energy begins to rise, dark and dense, and the environment reacts. That place is just a world inside a book, and a world like that has no way of invading his. The surrounding scenery is consumed and replaced by a dark purple space, heavy like the mind of someone who has seen things that shouldn't exist. The creature falls into despair. It can't understand how it's being overpowered by a mere child. The young man responds coldly. The number of lives taken by the master of that book doesn't come close to what he's already seen. An entire city, maybe more. The entity panics and charges with everything it has, refusing to be consumed. But it's already too late. Its body begins to come apart, fragment by fragment, until nothing remains. The environment returns to normal. The floor is still covered in red liquid, but the walls look unstable, as if the space itself is on the verge of collapse. Then a sweet voice rises. A girl with long hair and goat horns appears and calls him brother. The young man turns slowly. The figure approaches with a smile, says it's a pleasure to meet him, that she's been alone for a long time, and asks, with a curious look, if he'd like to play. The protagonist watches her in silence. He knows who she is. That grimoire was created by the immortal Duke Frederick, who sacrificed his own daughter in pursuit of pushing past the limits of death. That's why the book's avatar takes the form of a child, but that presence is not human. Without wasting time, he makes his offer. He wants the little girl to form a contract with him. She agrees, but with one condition: she wants to see his world. Dale agrees. The next instant, both of them are transported to the protagonist's inner space. The little girl looks around in surprise, enchanted. She says she likes this place, and that she likes her new brother even more. But something catches her attention. There are other people here, frightened figures, and among them is Cardinal Nikolai. Their presence says everything. No one believed the young man would actually manage to obtain that grimoire. The protagonist faces the clergyman and asks why he's there, since he made it clear the church would take no responsibility for anything that happened in that place. With a slight smile, he concludes that the man simply couldn't trust his own agreement and came in person to eliminate him. A grave mistake. Grave. This is the world of darkness, and for someone of the light, there could be no worse place to fight a battle. The horned girl tilts her head, curious, and asks her brother if she can devour those people. The young man looks at her for a moment and replies coldly that if she gets sick, that's not his problem. The little one smiles, excited, saying she'll finally have a feast after so long trapped in that frozen void. Nikolai begins to pray urgently, invoking the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. An intense light takes shape behind him, and an angelic entity descends onto the battlefield. The other soldiers follow his lead, raising their voices in prayer. Their backs tear open in light, wings emerge, and their bodies transform into divine figures, resembling angels. The protagonist watches in silence. He already knew it wouldn't be simple. The winged figures advance at an absurd speed. The young man moves at his limit, dodging blow after blow, feeling danger graze his body with every strike. A blade nearly catches him. Without hesitating, he responds with his magic, firing dark projectiles, but the creatures dodge with frightening precision. Nikolai raises the crucifix and declares that the boy is still limited to the third circle, and that the Black Goat's grimoire also cannot release its power in such immature hands. The light around the cardinal intensifies, as if divinity itself is being channeled in that very instant. The horned girl brings her hands to her ears, clearly affected by that sacred energy, but something inside her shifts. Her face contorts, not in pain, but in pure irritation. A dark energy begins to leak from her body, dense and violent, distorting her silhouette. Tentacles emerge. The angels advance without hesitation and cut through everything in a single motion. One of them appears before her and declares that the hour of judgment has come. The next instant, something goes wrong. The tentacles regenerate instantly and strike back with brutality, hurling the angels away. Nikolai watches, alarmed, asking if his warriors are still holding on. A voice echoes, distorted and repetitive, commanding them to praise. The angels begin to change. Their faces warp, veins rise through their skin, and their bodies tremble as if being consumed from within. What was once divine light now mixes with something wrong, something deeply disturbing. The angels warp before everyone's eyes, their sacred forms twisting into something grotesque and unrecognizable. The horned girl watches the scene and lets out a light laugh, almost childlike. She says she missed that smell so much, that she waited so long for this moment that she's going to savor every second of it. Her tentacles advance without mercy, tearing through the winged creatures one after another. That entity was a being capable of devouring even angels, and the young man who summoned her was no 11-year-old prodigy. What stood there was something far darker, something close to the devil's own son. Dale watches it all calmly and recalls Nikolai's own words. The parties of the contract bear no responsibility for what happens in hell. With no way out, the cardinal breaks down. Voice trembling, he begs to be spared. Dale approaches slowly, studying the man, and asks what he has to offer in return. Desperate, Nikolai promises everything: wealth, position, the power of the church under his command, anything to survive. A smile crosses the young man's face. He says he likes what he heard, reaches a hand toward the man's face, and with an almost gentle expression, tells him to hand over everything he has. In that moment, it becomes clear that the contract will need to be rewritten. The Gaius magic is not just a pact. For Nikolai, there is no longer any way back. Then the horned girl calls for Dale again, smiling in a way that is both sweet and unsettling. She says playing with him was a lot of fun, that she likes her new brother and will be waiting for him. She moves closer, graceful and threatening at the same time, and asks if he isn't afraid of her. Dale answers calmly that he isn't, but deep down, he knows that existence is far too dangerous to be revealed carelessly. A power he hasn't fully mastered yet, one that cannot be used recklessly. The girl's tentacles wrap around him as she asks if they'll get to play like this again. He says yes, drawing an excited smile from her. Dale tells her they'll see each other soon, and that when that day comes, she can play as much as she wants. The surroundings begin to dissolve. The void gives way to the cold stone walls of the library dungeon. Before disappearing, the girl says she'll be waiting for that reunion. And just like that, the chaos of hell comes to an end. The heir of the Saxon family receives a grand pardon issued in the name of Cardinal Nikolai. As a symbol of a new alliance between the church and the duchy, a grand ceremony is held, something never seen before. And on the way back, the young man no longer travels as an unknown pilgrim. No one dares stand in the path of the young Black Master's sword. A few months pass. Charlotte is at the training grounds when Helmut asks with firm composure if the young lady is ready to begin. At that very moment, a purple energy begins to radiate from her body. The aura grows dense and vibrant, enveloping her completely as her concentration reaches its peak. The blade is taken over by a dark energy tinged with deep violet, as if carrying a power beyond the ordinary. Around her, the soldiers can't hide their excitement. Helmet watches with a faint smile and acknowledges that manifesting aura at this level at such a young age is something extraordinary. Then a voice cuts through the moment, calling for Charlotte de Orhard. Dale approaches, fixes the girl with a serious look, and asks, "By the honor of her lord, her family, and everything she must protect, does she swear as a knight to fulfill her duty?" Without hesitation, Charlotte drives her sword into the ground and kneels before him. Her answer is firm. She swears it from the bottom of her heart. Dale rests the tip of his sword on her shoulders in a solemn gesture and asks if she swears to resist greed, protect the weak, and punish evil. The blonde raises her voice, resolute, and swears again. Then, in the name of the Saxon family, Dale names her Sir Charlotte, his knight. The two walk side by side after that. Dale, thoughtful, asks if she truly believes it will work out. Charlotte answers without hesitation that she does. She says she chose the Saxon family's sword because it was that sword that shaped who he became. Of her own will, she gave up her rapier and chose the great sword, even though it wasn't the easier path. Maybe he underestimated her talent. Dale changes the subject. He says he received troubling information. A massive orc army is gathering beyond the Demon King's territory, and by all accounts, the war chief himself is leading the troops. His father has already summoned the duchy's forces and all the lords of the north. A large-scale war is about to begin. That's why he wants Charlotte to fight by his side, not just as an ally, but as his true knight. Charlotte responds with quiet seriousness that she understands. She promises to be the sword that protects her lord with all her honor. Dale smiles faintly, knowing she will without a doubt be a formidable ally. Meanwhile, the Duke reviews reports with a heavy expression. Movements of a large orc army have been detected descending from the Darklands. One of the informants asks uneasily whether this could be the great demonic migration again. Another replies that it's very likely. When the hero defeated the Demon King alongside the Empire, the previous invasion was only a fraction of what still remained. There are still demons out there fighting to survive. The Duke declares that he has already ordered the summoning of all the lords of the North, the Black Tower, and the knightly orders under his command. What is coming will be a war on a scale never seen before. Then he looks at his son. His gaze is serious. The time has finally come to teach him how to use necromancy on the battlefield. That same afternoon, father and son are in the Black Duke's underground workshop. The first necromancy lesson begins with a direct question. What is the difference between a death knight and a simple undead? Dale answers that it must be the same difference between a knight and a common soldier. Alan gives a slight shake of his head. The answer is only partially right. Having strength isn't enough. The real difference is mastery of sword aura. Before them lies a lifeless body, a knight who fell recently in the Black and White War and who, even in death, swore that his body would serve the Saxon family. With a simple snap of his fingers, a dark aura runs through the corpse, seeping in as if awakening something that had been asleep. Alan explains that the higher the rank of a knight in life, the more powerful the death knight raised from him will be, and that knights, living or dead, remain soldiers of pride, something Dale must never forget. After the demonstration, the Duke turns and asks his son to follow him. There is something more important to be shown. The two descend through the dungeon, going deeper with every step. The sound of their footsteps echoes through the emptiness. The silence between them is heavy, but full of meaning, and Dale starts to wonder how far they will go. Then Alan breaks the silence and asks if his son knows the name of the immortal Duke Frederick, founder of the Saxon family. Dale recognizes the name immediately. The grimoire created by that man is carved into his heart, but he only answers that he read about him in books and that his father told him a few things. Alan continues. That man was a true monster, someone who didn't hesitate even to sacrifice his own daughter in pursuit of power. What is about to be shown is the legacy he left behind, the darkness of an ancient era. The two pass through a violet portal. Alan explains that only those with the purest bloodline of the family can cross through it. When they reach the other side, Dale's eyes go wide. Before them, a silent crowd of knights in black armor, completely still. Alan reveals the truth. The immortal Duke found a way to operate the dead without the constant need for mana. Generation after generation, the leaders of the Saxon family continued that work, building an army of the dead, the so-called Death Order, and Alan himself carries on that legacy to this day. Dale clenches his teeth. Everything starts to make sense. His father's words about proving will through actions, about never losing that determination. The family's isolation, the fear they inspire in the world. It's no accident. It's a choice built on a power too dark to be accepted by anyone else. For a moment, a thought crosses his mind. The contradiction is so great it's almost nauseating. The Duke extends his arm toward that silent army and declares that this is their darkness, the shield that will protect everything they have. Then he asks, his voice steady, if his son is ready to accept that power. Dale brings his hand to his chest and feels it beating hard, but his answer doesn't waver. He says yes, that he has been ready from the start. No matter how impure or dark that power may be, he will accept it willingly. The boy raises his hand and begins to concentrate mana. The focus is intense because this isn't just about casting magic. He is trying to control the corpse. The dead body responds. It grips a greatsword with both hands and holds it in front of its body in a solemn stance, almost like a bow. A moment later, the movement shifts, and the blade cuts through the air again and again, with precision and overwhelming force. Alan watches in silence for a moment, then remarks that the young man's mana concentration is absurd, refined to an uncommon level. Dale admits that he still can't control a Death Knight without continuously supplying mana the way the Order's members do. The Duke agrees, but says it's too early for that level. For now, the most important thing is learning to use necromancy in a practical way on the battlefield. The setting shifts. A dense dark energy fills the space, and several coffins around the room begin to absorb it. From inside them, goblin corpses rise, twisted and aggressive, charging straight at the undead under Dale's control. The confrontation doesn't last long. One of the goblins is hit immediately by a clean strike. The knight turns and, in a single sweeping motion, takes out every enemy around it. Then silence. The result is absolute. Inwardly, Alan is surprised. Not all Death Knights are equal, and Dale's swordsmanship surpasses even that of the Night Raven Knights. Sometime later, Sephia watches her student train with a different look in her eyes. She feels a tightness in her chest that she can't name, and it's starting to bother her. The elf recalls the day the boy said he liked her, pretending to be just a child. But the master saw what was inside, a cold and dark world, and the quiet longing of someone who craves genuine affection. As the boy keeps destroying his targets, she tries to push those thoughts away. She takes a deep breath and decides to compliment him, saying that his control over the water attribute has improved a lot. Dale explains that he made a promise to his father to become someone worthy of pride, but something about him seems unsettled. Sophia notices and asks what's going on. The young man looks down, slightly hesitant, and then asks an unexpected question, whether she would still be able to care for him even after seeing his ugliest side. He admits that one day he will have to fully embrace the dark side of his family, and he fears that when that day comes, his master will be disappointed in him. For a moment, silence fills the space. Then Sephia steps closer, places her hands on his face and makes him look at her. Her eyes don't waver. That simple gesture makes the young man's heart race. Sephia looks at her disciple with a deep gaze and says that an elf's life is long. Even when he becomes a true man, she will probably remain exactly as she is now. For a moment, her thoughts drift. She remembers when rumors of Dale's victory in the Black and White War spread across the Empire. People praised his talent, but also spread his dark reputation. Even hearing all of that, the elf could never truly feel happy. She didn't want her disciple walking a path of destruction. Gently, she says she will stay by his side until the day he understands her true feelings. Not just as a teacher, but as a woman beside her man, and she makes it clear he is not alone, and he never will be. Then she releases his face, steps back slightly, and clears her throat, trying to ease the weight of the moment. She shifts her tone and suggests they get back to the lesson. But Dale can't just move on. Overcome with emotion, he steps forward and pulls her into a tight embrace. He thanks her for everything she said, and without hesitation confesses from the bottom of his heart that he cares deeply for her. His voice heavy with feeling, he asks her to wait for him. In that embrace, the young man gives himself over to a warmth capable of driving away even the deepest cold inside him, a promise that will not be forgotten. A short time later, the scene changes completely. Soldiers raise colorful banners that flutter in the wind. To face the great demonic migration, the lords of the north begin gathering in the Duke's territory. A knight in armor steps forward and places a hand over his heart in a show of respect. He introduces himself as Kenneth of Balderburg, one of the mid-ranking lords under House Saxon's command, bringing 30 knights, 100 heavy infantry soldiers, and 400 common infantry. Among those who arrive, many young nobles carry ambition in their eyes. They all know exactly who they need to impress, the young heir. Bess, eldest son of the Gale family, introduces himself with confidence and declares he is ready to give his life for his lord and share the glory of the battlefield at his side. Nearby, young noblewomen also approach, pushing past whoever stood in their way, praising Dale with charming smiles and saying they never imagined he would be so mature and impressive. The atmosphere shifts when a purple-haired young man approaches, straight to the point. He says he has heard of the heir's strength and would like to see it with his own eyes. Right behind him, a gray-haired man tries to intervene, calling the young man insolent and offering his apologies. But Dale raises his hand, asking for silence. He already knows who stands before him, Jones, the second son of Baron Kenneth. With a serious tone, Dale repeats the request and asks whether that means the young man wants to test him. Jones answers with respect, but without backing down. He says he knows all the stories about Dale and has never doubted his ability. Dale knows who he is dealing with, not just any soldier, but the young man known as the Empire's martial genius. With a slight smile, he confirms, Sir Jones truly leads a group of 100 mercenaries he built from scratch? The answer is yes. As the second son of a baron, his place within his own family was practically sealed from the start. With no right to inheritance, all he could do was earn his worth with a sword. For Dale, this is more than just a duel. It's a valuable opportunity. With a smile, he accepts the challenge. The two move apart in the hall, and the mood shifts immediately. This confrontation is not just a test of skill, but a battle for position before the war. Jones adjusts his stance. Dale calmly warns that his sword is unlike any other. The other replies that he has already heard of the Shadow Sword. Then Dale gives the order, his voice firm. Jones should use his aura and his full strength, without holding back and without hesitation. An order the swordsman accepts. A purple aura begins to surround Jones's body. He hasn't yet reached the level of a true full aura knight, but his foundation is solid and his movements are clean and well trained. Dale picks up on that in an instant and decides to respond in kind. A dark energy rises from the ground and takes shape, forming a shadow sword. The entire hall feels the difference. The pressure shifts and the air grows heavy. Dale repeats that his opponent should come with everything he has. The duel begins like a lightning strike. Jones charges forward and his blade cuts through the air at blinding speed, passing dangerously close to Dale's face. The young man dodges by a hair, his eyes tracking every movement, but the attacks don't stop. Fast, powerful, and driven by a will to win. Inside, Jones carries a single thought. His opponent has always had everything since birth. The swords clash with a crash. Determined to prove that someone with nothing can still beat someone who has everything, the purple-haired young man charges straight ahead, grips his sword with both hands, and drives a direct strike toward Dale's face. He found an opening. His body shifts slightly, and the blade closes in on the protagonist. Jones's strike comes with full force, but while the young man was still recovering his stance, it's him who gets caught off guard. Dale's sword is inches from his face. No blow is landed. Instead, a long shadow forms on the ground, and from it rise blades made of darkness. Dale smiles with the confidence of someone who knows exactly what he's doing. With a flick of his hand, the blades surge forward, and Jones dodges with impressive agility, his aura still active around his body. Dale watches his opponent and decides the young man is worthy enough to help him make a name for himself. In a taunting tone, he announces he won't move an inch, that Jones can come to him. Eyes burning with hatred, the knight leaps forward and swears the boy will regret underestimating him. Their swords clash again, and Dale holds the strike without giving ground. Around them, the onlookers watch the duel in tense silence. The surprise is plain to see. No one expected this much from an 11-year-old boy, but the eldest son of House Saxon is proving himself a true warrior. Dale presses forward again and taunts, "Let Jones try to dodge the next one." A burst of dark energy flies toward the knight, but the young man realizes his opponent isn't trying to land a hit. He's trying to impress the northern lords and their sons. Insulted by the display, Jones cuts through the dark energy with his sword and charges in with everything he has. Pouring every ounce of strength and determination into it, the purple-haired young man gives it his all, because admitting that Dale's talent was the living embodiment of the world's unfairness was something he simply couldn't face. But when his blade splits in two, the truth can no longer be ignored. Jones kneels. He rests the tip of his broken sword on the ground and lowers his head in defeat. Dale is left alone with his thoughts for a moment. Maybe he performed so well because of the Black Goat's book. During the fight, the entire world seemed to slow down. The Shadow Sword felt like an extension of his own body, and the Shadow Blades responded like tentacles under his control. It was the battle with Jones that made that growth visible. Turning his aura into shards of shadow, Dale fires them toward his opponent, not to cause harm, just as a demonstration. Then he turns to the hall with a challenging look and asks out loud if anyone else wants to try. The answer comes in a different form. A sword tip drives into the ground beside the boy, and a knight bows in reverence, pledging his loyalty to the young lord aloud. Dale recalls something his father used to say, "Fear ensures loyalty." Looking at that scene, the boy understands it's the plain truth. Sometime later, the event continues with nobles drinking and talking. Jones leaves the hall with two friends. As one of them drinks straight from the bottle, he remarks that the young man doesn't look well. Jones answers with disappointment in his voice. No matter how much he swings his sword, it feels like he'll never come close to the young lord. He always believed a person's worth isn't decided at birth. That effort changes everything. But that idea makes no sense at all when he thinks about the eldest son of House Saxon. Dwelling on it only makes him angrier, so he tells his friends to stop asking and drink with him. The group gathers around a bonfire. Jones remarks with a scoff that the women at the event were all over an 11-year-old kid. Nobles pretending to be modest just to get a child's attention. Pathetic. When you strip away the titles, people are all the same. And with a crooked smile, he adds that Dale probably doesn't even know what to do with that much female attention. Then he realizes he's no longer alone with his friends. Dale himself is there. The other men jump to their feet in alarm, asking when the boy had shown up. With an easy arrogance, the young man sits down by the bonfire as if he'd been invited. He picks up a bottle and asks Jones to pour. As the young man pours, Dale asks if he resents the world. To the boy, the world is unfair and absurd because there isn't a single thing humans can decide for themselves. From the talent they're born with to the environment they grow up in, everything is beyond anyone's control. With a friendly expression, he places his hand on Jonas's shoulder and tells him not to be too hard on himself, because there is no fate that can be changed by one's own hands. Jonas hears that and starts laughing, a laugh that won't stop. Then, with a tired smile, he admits the young lord is probably right, that no matter how hard he pushed himself, he never really had a chance. Dale says he's grown quite fond of the young man, of him and his mercenary company. Then he asks if they wouldn't like to put their swords to use in the name of House Saxon. The offer leaves Jones completely at a loss. Dale lays out the proposal. The Night Ravens, his order of knights, can train Jones's men before the approaching battle, from how to wield a sword to the methods of aura cultivation. There was a cruel irony in that. The boy who had shown Jones more than anyone how unfair the world was now the only one willing to give him a chance no one else would dare offer. Dale explains that he needs more people on his side, and that Jones simply happened to be in the right place at the right time. To the mercenary, it felt like the world's injustice had vanished all at once. Sometime later, dawn has already broken over the great Saxon manor. In the castle's meeting room, the Duke calls for a situation report. A massive mountain range separates the Demon King's territory from the duchy, and the defensive line is barely holding. The advanced patrol unit has begun pulling back from the 9th fortress alongside the northern lords, but before giving up the ground, they burned everything they couldn't carry. If the defense holds its position while falling back, the enemy will reach the Upper Saxon River exhausted, and there the soldiers can block and annihilate the main force. The time has come to deploy the field army. The Duke orders the lords to be notified, and the troops to prepare to march. Before everyone disperses, Alan asks to speak with Dale privately. He will place the mobile strike force entirely under his son's command, and once the large-scale conflict begins, Dale will be in command alone. But Safia has decided to stay by his side. This surprises the young man. It isn't the Blue Tower's principle to intervene in worldly conflicts. Alan reflects that the elf is already the greatest advisor to House Saxon, and that the fight against the barbarians can hardly be called a worldly conflict. Concerned, Dale asks whether this is truly his teacher's own wish. The Duke confirms it and adds that his son proved his abilities at the victory of the Black and White Turning Point. He will surely do well now. Dale agrees, but says he has one more request. With a worried expression, the Duke asks what it is. The young man asks for the ghost swordswoman to be assigned to his unit. Charlotte puts on her armor's helmet with the expression of someone who has already made up her mind. Dale is surprised by such confidence. She explains that it's because she is the guardian knight who will stand beside the famous young black master. The young man says she looks like a real knight now, not a little girl anymore, but something is bothering him. He recalls the sinister look in a knight's eyes and decides to ask his friend for a promise that she do whatever it takes to stay alive. Charlotte replies that risking her life for her lord is a knight's duty. Dale asks if she wants him to teach her the true duty of a knight, and answers it himself. Never betray your lord's trust, and what he wants is for her not to die, because this battlefield was not made for her. Charlotte says she will carry that in her heart. Shortly after, the orc horde begins moving south, and the main force led by the Duke sets out on the march. Dale heads toward the Upper Saxon River alongside Bale, Charlotte, his teacher Sefia, and his order of knights. As he rides, he looks back and takes in his allied forces. He knows that from that moment on, Sefia is no longer just his teacher. The moon is still fading from the sky when they reach the camp at the Upper Saxon River. Sefia walks through the surrounding area. Dale finds her with a serious expression and gets straight to the point. He wants to know why she accepted his father's proposal. The elf answers that she is simply following the calling of her life, that she promised to stay by Dale's side. The young man smiles and thanks her, but a noise cuts the conversation short. Dale shouts for the mobile strike force to prepare for battle. The orcs have reached the camp and are making their first move before the soldiers even have a chance to react. Bale rushes over, visibly anxious, urging the young lord to give the order quickly. The orcs are pushing to cross the river and advance directly. Dale orders Bale to take 4 battalions and launch an immediate raid on the front, killing every orc before they can form a bridge. He himself will handle the other 2 battalions to strike the rear. The archers warn that the monsters are already very close. Bale shouts for his soldiers not to let a single one reach the bank. A rain of arrows flies at the orcs as they advance. Dale's knights follow the strategy. Tense, the young lord hopes Bale can hold firm long enough. But as they ride along the path, 2 hooded figures lurk behind a rock, waiting for the hero to pass. The archers work without rest, holding back the orc advance. With the high ground on their side, they can aim with precision, even at the wolf-mounted monsters. But one of the wolves builds momentum and leaps straight into the archer line. It bites down on a soldier's shoulder with brutal force. The scream echoes across the battlefield. Even so, the orcs eventually reach the bridge. The order is clear. Expose them one by one and let none of them through. After a long, forced march, the enemy's rear units must be at their limit. Dale plans to cross the shallow waters upstream and attack from behind. But for that, Bale needs to hold on just a little longer. A soldier falls. A massive orc raises its axe and stares down the men still standing. Then the explosion comes from behind the enemy lines. Dale reached the planned position. Bale seizes the moment and orders the advance up front. The enemy is cut off, and now it's time to close the encirclement with the young lord's cavalry. The soldiers show no mercy. Dale readies his shadow shot, and a burst of energy projectiles begins sweeping through the orcs one by one. The troops gain confidence watching their lord lead the charge, but Dale doesn't notice the orc closing in from behind. Charlotte appears before the monster can act. A clean sword strike brings the enemy down, and she tells Dale not to worry. She has it handled. Nearby, Cephia is also pushing her limits on the battlefield and warns, if they take much longer, the orcs will reorganize their formation. Bale uses his spear to knock down anyone who gets close, but the orcs are still too many. Soon he warns that the monsters are regrouping for a counterattack. Dale orders an immediate retreat. The cavalry begins pulling away from the wolf-mounted orcs. The objective has already been met. There's no need for a total victory. The plan now is to draw the enemies to a point where their reinforcements can't keep up, then finish off the survivors. That's when Sophia notices something is wrong. Among the wolves, there's a horse, and on it, a hooded figure with fire energy building in the palm of their hand. Sophia shouts for Dale to get clear and at the same time starts charging ice energy. She launches it behind them. A massive barrier forms in the way, freezing everything in its path. But the hooded figure already had enough power. The blazing attack flies toward the blockade. Fire and ice collide in a clash of magic. The barrier holds for a moment, then gives way. The flames tear through the ice and hit a soldier. Nothing is left. The body vanishes completely. Dale's eyes go wide. That's no ordinary fire. He orders all units to scatter. It's a purifier from the red magic tower, a pyromancer. Combat mages with a single purpose: burn the enemies of the Empire and the tower. Cephia and Dale reach the same conclusion at the same time. They're after the young lord. Dale shouts for everyone to keep moving and to stay spread out. Charging in formation against Red Tower mages is the same as marching to your death, but if they scatter too far, the orcs will tear them apart. There's no clean way out, and Dale knows he may have to use his secret power. Before he can decide, a voice calls out to him. It's Sophia. She rides up and asks him to get off his horse, to let her fulfill her duty as his master. Dale looks at her with a heavy gaze. Then he pulls his horse to a stop, catching everyone off guard. He calls over another soldier and orders the rest of the cavalry to continue carrying out the previous command. Charlotte is to deliver the message to the Duke immediately. The girl pushes back. She says her duty is to protect the young lord. Dale repeats himself. It's an order. She shouldn't worry. Just go. Reluctantly, Charlotte nods, turns her horse, and rides off. Dale knows running isn't an option right now. Cephia asks, surprised, if he had been planning to escape. He answers that he wasn't. He would never leave his master alone in a situation like this. As she prepares her next strike, Cephia shows she has finally grasped the full picture, and thanks Dale for having considered her in his plans. At that moment, one of the wolves ridden by the orcs charges fiercely at the two of them. Cephia gathers power in her palm and conjures ice crystals, launching the spell at the enemy. A piercing howl echoes across the field as the creatures freeze in place, the orcs neutralized on top of motionless mounts. Even the rider coming up right behind them loses any chance of advancing. Dale warns, their opponent is a blue elder, a 6th circle mage. Anyone who dares face them had better be ready. Then, without hesitating, he demands to know what their real objectives are, and why the red magic tower would be conspiring with demons. The hooded man replies that Dale is nothing but fuel for the fire. He hurls a fireball at him, declaring that their lives will serve as a sacrifice to the red. Sephia steps in front of her student and conjures blue dissonance, a spell capable of unraveling other spells. In the blink of an eye, all that energy vanishes. Taking advantage of the opening, Dale orders the Saxon knights to advance. The enemy's attacks have been neutralized. Raise the lances, move. The units obey without hesitation, pushing forward against the monsters and taking them down one by one. Watching the carnage from a distance, the Duke remarks that what the young mages are facing now goes far beyond ordinary battles. What awaits them is the true abyss. Chaos, fear, and contempt all tangled together. That is why he warns them. Don't cling to victory or defeat. Let chaos and death become fuel. Carry the fear inside, but never let it take over. Alan orders the Saxon mages to burn that carnage into their memory and use it as the strength to shape the future. Then he turns to Eris, who responds with a bow. The Duke declares that the time has come to send the children to the crossing point. Eris agrees. It is then that Charlotte appears in a hurry, visibly distressed. She pulls off her helmet to identify herself and warns, without beating around the bush, the young lord is in danger. Horses charge toward the conflict. Dale's troops are already pushing against the enemy when a pyromancer begins concentrating energy in his arm and launches it at the knights with full force. Dale and Sephia react, holding back the attack with their own spells. The clash between water, ice, and fire forms a colossal barrier that completely blocks the cavalry's advance. Dale decides to strike back, using fragments of the frozen barrier. The technique, Shadow Magnum, fires high-speed projectiles at the hooded figures, attacks capable of killing instantly if they hit their mark. But the enemies were already prepared. They raise a fire aura that neutralizes the projectiles, and Dale realizes he is running out of options. That flame armor is no ordinary equipment. It even held up against Sephia's attack moments before. One of the lancers closes in and shouts that the pyromancer's flames will end right there. The hooded figures concentrate power again, and in a brutal counterattack, cause the lancers' weapons to combust as they run them through. The purifiers advance dangerously towards Sephia. Dale moves in front of her and fires dark energy projectiles. The shots hit the enemies with precision. One of the hooded figures goes down, and Dale uses the opening to demand answers. What are their objectives? Why the attack? The enemy replies that soon the entire world will be consumed by flames. As he speaks, his body begins to change. Everything will burn, he says, and they will rise from the ashes. Dale understands immediately what is happening. The pyromancer is using a self-destruction spell. The armor does not just serve as protection, but as a means to immolate the user's own body. He orders Sephia to get back immediately. The enemy screams that it is already too late. The explosion is massive, comparable to a devastating bomb. A trail of destruction spreads across the entire area. When the dust settles, Sephia is lying beside Dale, who struggles to get up. He looks at his master, still alive. The ice barrier created before the explosion was enough to prevent the worst. Even the Night Raven knights are knocked down by the impact. Then another pyromancer appears. He notices the young lord is still standing and moves directly toward him. The enemy's hand closes in too fast, barely any time to react. Even so, Dale gathers his strength and pushes forward. With a precise movement, he cuts the opponent down with his sword. The enemy begins to combust, just like the one before, but this time, Dale is already clear and finishes him off. 2 down. Dale had endured everything up to that point, waiting for the right opening. The memories flash through his mind quickly, the pain, the torture, the modifications he went through. He faces the next opponent with a look that leaves no room for doubt. Don't even think about running. He will pay back everything he suffered, many times over. With effort, Sophia manages to get back on her feet. All around her, cries of pain and agony echo across the field. In the middle of the chaos, Dale faces the pyromancers completely alone. Without hesitation, the boy charges at one of the enemies. The opponent bursts into flames and explodes like a bomb, incinerating the knights who were still standing. The bodies of those who swore to protect the Duke are consumed and torn apart in a storm of fire, while the pyromancers laugh as if none of it matters. But among everyone on the field, the true incarnation of hell was Dale. The enemies realize that self-destruction no longer works, and shout for everyone to attack at once. One of the hooded figures, wounded, doubles over in pain. Another charges straight at the protagonist and receives a fatal blow. It was as if all the pain he had held back over time was being released right there, with every movement. With every attack, Dale turned his own suffering into blades. The pyromancers tried to fight back, burst into flames, but caused no damage at all. Those who remained watched the scene in disbelief. To them, the young man standing before them was not just an enemy. He was the very incarnation of vengeance. Dale approaches the survivors and states coldly that their mission has failed. They would never be able to kill him. One of the pyromancers pushes back, questioning whether he dares to speak of victory after everything he witnessed. Even with the black magic tower destroyed, the enemies showed no fear whatsoever. The man declares that everyone there was already prepared to die, that they had even sacrificed their own bodies for it. The attitude catches Dale off guard. He realizes he is facing someone willing to act as a kamikaze. The enemy charges and bursts into flames. A new explosion forms dangerously close. Even so, after the impact, Dale remains standing, completely unharmed. And to everyone's surprise, the purifier who should have been destroyed is also still alive. Then a figure appears on horseback, approaching with authority. It is the Black Lord, the Duke, arriving to protect his son. He states that being prepared to die is a relatively easy thing. With imposing calm, he questions the pyromancers whether they have the will to live, because living, in his view, demands far greater courage than simply accepting death. Enraged, the enemies charge at the newcomer, accusing him of talking nonsense. A crash and an explosion mark the clash between them, but once again the pyromancer comes out whole. The Duke stares at him coldly and asks if he still does not understand. Alan simply did not grant the pyromancers permission to die. In that place, there was no path to death by their own will. The man concentrates a purple energy in his hand, a curse, an abominable fusion, launched directly at the remaining purifiers. The enemies' bodies begin to come apart slowly, as if melting. Little by little, they cease to exist as individuals and vanish from the battlefield. In their place, a grotesque mass of intertwined eyes, mouths, and teeth rises before the Duke. With cold composure, Alan states that living can be far more painful than being prepared to die. Without any interest, he declares that he will not ask why they chose to side with the orcs or try to kill his son. After all, they already threw their own lives away. As their sentence, he decrees that they will live forever in that monstrous form. Meanwhile, one of the fallen soldiers calls out to the young lord in a weak voice. Even on the verge of death, he asks to fulfill his duty as a Knight of the Night Crow. Dale approaches and carefully lifts the warrior's body. With respect, he says he understands his wish and assures him that both he and the entire Saxon house will never forget his devotion. The soldier's arm falls limp. In silence, he takes his leave from life. The Duke approaches and calls out to his son. He remarks that the losses were severe, but Dale responds that he has no excuses. The father asks if he is blaming himself as a commander, and the boy admits that he led the Saxon knights to their deaths, that he should have ordered a retreat from the start. In a calm voice, the Duke asks him not to carry that weight alone. The intention had been to face dozens of orc knights and purifiers practically by himself, with only Sifia at his side. In the end, the young man did everything within his power. Dale lowers his head, still unable to fully accept that victory. The Saxon knights left behind words asking for permission to fulfill their duty even after death. That means the battle is not over yet. The body of the soldier who just fell begins to rise, and Dale asks the Duke to allow the knights to carry out their mission to the end. Meanwhile, in a distant location, we see the famous Red Magic Tower. There, a red-haired man is accompanied by a young blonde woman. The setting reveals itself to be the bedroom of Marquis Yuri. With a gentle smile, the man asks if she had pleasant dreams. The girl answers that she did, and remarks that she might still be dreaming. After all, being alone with someone known as the most beautiful man in the Empire is quite an honor. In a light tone, she asks if he is really that charming, and the young man replies that she should see for herself. The two draw close and share an intense kiss, but something strange catches the young woman's attention. Drops of a red liquid begin to fall to the floor, and a strong metallic taste floods her mouth. Startled, she realizes what it means, but the man already brings his hand to her face. He looks at her with cold cynicism, holding her chin, and asks in a deeply unsettling tone whether the drink is not to her liking. Day begins to break. In the distance, smoke still rises from the battlefield. A surviving orc keeps fighting, pushing against the remaining knights. Helmet stands out among them, dodging attacks and blocking the enemy's brutal strikes with his massive sword. The opponent he faces is no ordinary foe. It's the orc war chief, the leader of that enemy force. The young lord then orders Helmet to fall back, declaring that defeating the orcs is his responsibility and his knights. Without hesitation, Dale advances alongside his troops. One of the knights goes straight for the enemy commander. Helmet watches the scene, stunned. That attack formation transformation would only be possible under the control of an extremely skilled necromancer. The undead advance with surgical precision, facing the orc with a disturbing efficiency. Suddenly, the creature's eyes begin to glow. The monster lets out a piercing shriek, powerful enough to damage the nearby soldiers. Helmet orders an immediate retreat. That threat was beyond what they could handle, but Dale ignores the order and keeps moving forward. He knows his power still isn't enough. To win, he needs to become even more cruel and terrifying. At that moment, the little girl tied to his power, the entity from the goat book, asks if she should help him. Dale refuses. It's not time for her to step in yet, and using that power in front of everyone would be far too risky. The small girl hugs him warmly and says she would never do anything her master hated. She only asks that he play with her as much as he wants. Dale's dark energy begins to grow, spreading toward the orc. A sinister shadow rises beneath his feet. Even so, the war chief shows no fear and charges forward, weapons in hand. Dale activates the skill Shadow Stalker. The strike lands directly on the enemy's forehead. Shadows surge from the ground and pierce the orc's body at multiple points at once. The enemy leader falls, finally defeated. With that victory, the young master earns a new title before everyone, the man who defeated the leader of the orc order during the barbarian invasions, the feared Black Prince. The scene shifts. We're taken back to the Black Magic Tower. The Duke asks Eris whether the investigation into the purifiers yielded any results. She answers that it didn't. They invaded the enemy's minds for 3 days and 3 nights, but most of the brain functions had already been removed. Memory erasure magic was involved. It was clear those men had already been prepared to be captured, and that they knew in advance Dale would split from the main force to advance with the cavalry. Eris asks if Alan suspects anyone. The man answers only that they could be nothing but true monsters. Surprised, she asks whether that means the extremist elders of the Black Tower would be conspiring with the Crimson Magic Tower. Alan explains, during the Empire's Unification War, there was an unofficial unit that brought together mages from the Black and Crimson Towers for joint academic investigations. After the war ended, the group was dissolved and all records erased. Under the Black Duke's command, the Black Tower had decided to cut ties with the darkness of that era. Even so, some extremists kept searching for the forbidden truth. The winds of purgatory may blow again. The Duke agrees. The hypothesis is quite likely. Sometime later, Dale finds himself in the place where the bodies of the fallen knights rest, the Black Duke's underground workshop. There lie those who trusted him and followed him to the end, and who even after death remained by his side. As their leader, the boy feels the weight of that sacrifice. So he asks his father how the order to raise the undead works. The Duke acknowledges his son's potential, but raises a question, whether the boy will be able to free himself from the darkness that even he could not escape. He then states that when Dale grows up and surpasses him, the entire Dark Army will naturally become his. Dale immediately understands what that means. To reach that position, he would need to defeat the greatest dark mage on the continent, his own father. Without hesitating, he asks if he can challenge him to a duel right then and there. The Duke agrees to hear the terms. Dale asks for only one thing, that his father fight with everything he has. The man accepts, telling his son to come at him with all he's got. Dale raises 2 black knights to assist him. The Duke watches the enchantment with interest. It's impressive. Even so, he dodges the creature's attacks with ease. Dale then declares that if the attacks are coordinated, there will be no escaping them, and activates Shadow Stalker. The blades advance simultaneously toward the Duke's face, but something unexpected happens. The knights stop completely. The Duke calmly explains that in a duel between dark mages, losing control of one's own shadows is extremely dangerous. Dale's eyes go wide at his father's power. Then he remembers, darkness always flows toward where it is deepest and densest. There's no other choice. He needs to focus his entire mind, just as he has done before. The knights begin to move again. One of them strikes the Duke with a direct blow to the head. The man's head rolls across the floor. Dale freezes, unable to believe what he's seeing. But the Duke calmly states that it was impressive for the boy to have regained control of the shadows, and then the head begins to return to his body. Dale watches in complete disbelief as his father explains that he simply does not allow his own death. That is the result of his ability to manipulate reality itself. Magic is turning imagination into existence, and at its peak, it becomes possible to distort even the laws of the world, just as he did when he removed the Purifier's explosive power. Dale finally understands an unavoidable truth. From the very beginning, this was a duel he could never win. The day dawns quietly, not long after the end of the barbarian invasions. An Imperial envoy arrives with a clear mission. to keep House Saxon under the Emperor's direct watch. The messenger declares that the Emperor was deeply pleased with the loyalty and sound judgment shown by the family, and gives special mention to the Black Prince who, despite his young age, has already built a reputation recognized across the entire court. As a reward, and also to foster closer ties between the Black and Red Towers, an invitation arrives. The young master is called to spend a period at the Red Magic Towers Academy in the Imperial capital. Alan makes no effort to hide his concern. To him, sending the boy to the capital at this moment is extremely dangerous. Even so, the young man seems willing to walk straight into what could be a trap. He explains that the son of Marquis Eulis will also come to reside at the Black Magic Tower as part of the exchange. In practice, both sides would be keeping each other's heirs under watch, and neither could afford to act recklessly. The Duke remains worried and asks if the young man has already forgotten the Purifier's attack. The boy replies that he doubts anyone in the Imperial capital would dare lay a hand on the Black Duke's successor. From the Empire's point of view, he is no longer just a threat. He is a piece too valuable to be thrown away. The father then asks how he explains the recent attack. The young man argues that the Red Tower was most likely just testing his abilities, and that Marcus Eulis must have been curious to measure his strength. If they truly wanted him dead, they wouldn't have sent such a small group. The Duke asks what the real purpose of this trip would be. The boy answers that he wants to see the Empire with his own eyes, and that since the Red Tower started the provocations, it's only natural they respond in kind. Alan lowers his head, torn. He understands the reasoning and, deep down, knows the boy is right. Still, he gives one final warning. The moment he sets foot in the capital, everyone will see him as nothing more than a child. The young man says he will keep that in mind. With his hand over his heart, he declares that he will do everything for his father and for House Saxon. Far away from there, at the Red Magic Tower, someone is showing great excitement. A young man with red hair remarks that he can't wait for this meeting. To him, youth is the phase where curiosity outweighs fear. Beside him lies a young blonde woman, already lifeless. The man looks at her and comments that she never bothered to reflect on anything and ended up rotting away like that. Even so, he acknowledges that her red fluid was truly magnificent. In an almost poetic tone, he says that a quick death can be a blessing, like petals that bloom intensely before falling with grace. An immortal life, on the other hand, can be empty and meaningless. He crushes a wine glass with his bare hands and compares that kind of existence to a weed that never blooms. Finally, looking up at the sky, he declares that young Master Dale will be most welcome, because according to him, the boy is the only one capable of filling that emptiness. Sometime later, Dale travels in a carriage alongside Bale and Cephia. Along the way, he shows some restlessness with the long journey, while Bale watches him in silence. Ever since the day she witnessed his true form, the mage hasn't been able to speak to him with the same ease as before. The image of that moment is still vivid in her mind, with no explanation she can find to soften it. The elf seems visibly uneasy. The carriage approaches the Red Magic Tower. Armed soldiers appear to receive them. Dale steps out of the vehicle and begins walking slowly, as a voice announces that the young master of House Saxon honors them with his presence. They arrive at the Imperial Academy, attached to the tower. The red-haired man approaches with a restrained smile. It is Marquis Eulis, who gives an elegant bow and states that everyone had been waiting for the young master's arrival. Dale replies that he is likewise grateful for the invitation. Eulis remarks that, rather than remaining only a scholar, the young man chose to walk the path of the battlefield, and that this decision carries immense worth. Stories of his deeds are already beginning to spread across the entire empire. Dale keeps his expression closed, unmoved by the praise. This man was the one who allied himself with the barbarians and reduced the Black Crow Knights to ash before his very eyes. Even so, he has to endure it all in silence for now. Eulis continues, saying that every time he hears rumors about the Black Prince's power, he can't help but be impressed. Dale replies that stories tend to be exaggerated. The Marquis insists, stating that such extraordinary talent is exactly what the Academy wishes to welcome, and extends his hand in greeting. Dale simply ignores the gesture. He walks past without responding. With his hand over his heart, he offers a respectful greeting to the Emperor's people. The men behind the Marquis laugh quietly, remarking that the young man has impeccable manners. Inside, Dale is extremely tense. He knows he must wait for the right moment, for House Saxon's sake, and that when the time comes, he will make that man kneel at his own game. Eulis watches the scene with growing interest. There is something something fascinating in the young man's eyes, burning with a silent fury. The red magic tower rises on the horizon once again, as imposing as ever. Inside, a professor leads a class in front of a room full of students. The topic of the day is fire and water attributes, elements that are opposites by nature. But the whispers among the students are about something else entirely, the presence of the Black Prince. Many still can't believe the boy reached the third cycle at only 11 years old. Marquis Euless placed him directly in the most advanced class at that level, and several weeks have already passed since his arrival. The graduation exam is getting close. Completing the academy and becoming a mage of the Crimson Tower is practically a guaranteed path to success among the Empire's nobles, so it was only natural that the students wouldn't welcome an outsider. Nothing serious had happened up to that point, but Dale knows the Marquis didn't bring him there just to sit through classes. Suddenly, a student raises his hand and interrupts the professor. He's a blonde boy, sitting in a relaxed, disrespectful way. His name is Leonard. He complains that the class is way too boring, and the professor, visibly cautious, apologizes and asks what the young man would like to be done. Leonard suggests that, since there's a rare exchange between the Black and Red Towers and a young lord present, there should be something more interesting, the Black Prince taking part in a real exchange between mages. Inside the academy, everything works like a small kingdom. Bloodline hierarchy and power ranking decide who's in charge. Dale figures that boy is probably the direct heir of Walter, the master of the Red Tower. Leonard goes on, saying that everyone is talking about Dale, the boy who crossed the 20th floor of the Trial Tower and led the battle between Black and White, the greatest genius in the Empire, and that's exactly why he wants to see that talent with his own eyes. Dale lets a faint smile slip. Calmly, he replies that rumors tend to grow in the minds of those who listen to them. Leonard shoots back that pretty words are easy, he wants to see real action. With a confident smile, Dale accepts the challenge. A short while later, the two are facing each other in the room. The professor, uneasy, asks if Dale is aware of the rules for magical attack exchanges. For someone from the northern frontier, that kind of display seems excessive. After all, they're in an advanced third cycle class at an Imperial Academy. Dale looks at the professor and suggests using a life point collar. He explains it would be too dangerous to fight without protection. If someone gets seriously hurt or dies, someone will have to answer for it. And he points out that in certain moments, magic can be used with the intent to kill. The words leave the professor visibly on edge. Desperate, he announces that the duel is cancelled, or that they at least use the protection collar. Leonard grabs the professor by the collar. He says he doesn't need any device to beat a little brat. He shoves the man and tells him to shut up and just watch. Dale taunts him, asking how much longer his opponent plans to just stand there. Leonard then proposes a condition. If Dale loses, he'll be disqualified from graduation and removed from the class. If Leonard loses, he gives up his right to take the final exam. Dale is already channeling his shadow swords. He considers the offer for a moment and accepts without hesitation, smiling. Leonard starts building up energy. A massive stream of fire takes shape in his hands, the flames moving like a living serpent, spinning through the air with intensity. Both of them move forward at the same time. The duel is intense from the very first moment. Blows are exchanged without pause, and the clash between the magics triggers small explosions all around. The students watch in surprise, feeling the wind pressure generated by the attacks. Some can barely keep up with the movements. Dale's eyes go wide. His opponent is no ordinary fighter. In a quick attack, he strikes directly against the fire stream. Leonard pulls back and repositions fast, preparing his next move. Dale raises his sword with force, ready to finish the fight. Then something unexpected happens. An explosion goes off close to his face. Dale is hit, his clothes partially set on fire. Confused, he looks around trying to understand what happened and realizes another student interfered in the duel. Dale stares at Leonard and questions whether that counts as a fair exchange. The blonde laughs, pretending not to understand the accusation. He says it's not about allies, it's that everyone there is bothered by the boy's presence. Then he shoots a threatening look at the professor and warns him not to even think about reporting what happened. If Leonard's father finds out, the professor's position will be on the line. Turning back to Dale, Leonard asks if he wants to keep going. After all, this duel will decide who has the real talent. Instead of attacking, Dale lowers his arms. He suggests ending it right there. If they stop now, they can still treat it as a mistake. Leonard refuses. Dale tells the blonde to look around. The environment changes completely. The room disappears and gives way to a dark forest under the night sky. The students start to notice something is wrong. Everyone's mana seems to have vanished. With a sarcastic smile, Dale remarks that it's pathetic, and he taunts, asking what kind of fire mage lets his own flames go out so easily. Dale declares that this is his world now, and that in here, Leonard could barely manage to light a single flame. He raises his hand and fires bursts of dark energy toward the students, as if they were nothing more more than a nuisance. The energy transforms into shadowy tentacles that, within moments, wrap around everyone's necks, and one by one, the students are lifted into the air. Dale states that it's time to put an end to this farce. The professor shouts desperately, begging him to stop. He says he'll come up with whatever justification is needed, but pleads for him to spare Leonard. The tentacle loosens slightly around the blonde's neck. With cold composure, Dale states he never had any intention of killing anyone, but he warns, next time, Leonard had better be ready to risk his own life. The scene shifts. Night has taken over the sky, the moon rising through the clouds, and voices and laughter echo through the streets. In the middle of it all, the professor is being brutally beaten. Leonard attacks him relentlessly, kicks, punches, pure rage. He demands to know how the man dared to speak in the name of House Walter and interfere like that, tarnishing his reputation. Desperate, the professor throws himself at the blonde's feet and begs for forgiveness. Leonard kicks him again and tells him to stop talking nonsense, calling him useless. Around them, a few people laugh at the scene. Leonard, visibly irritated and with a tense expression, orders everyone to leave. With a look full of hatred, he tells them to take the professor away. He wants to be alone. The people help the man to his feet and remove him from the area. One of the young women mutters under her breath that the boy might not have that much power after all, but that his temper has gotten much worse, and that without House Walter's backing, he'd be nothing. Alone, Leonard holds a glass with a trembling hand. He knows he won't be able to take the graduation exam. As that thought sinks in, he grips the glass so hard it shatters in his hand. The cut bleeds, but all he feels is rage. A new presence appears. A voice remarks that it was quite an interesting spectacle. Leonard snaps and asks who dared to enter without permission. The red-haired man replies coldly, "For the eldest son of House Walter, that was a pathetic display. It's the Crimson Lord." Recognizing him, the young man becomes visibly uneasy and questions why he's here. The red-haired man says the day was far from satisfying. Leonard lowers his head and asks if the Lord came to mock him. The man replies that if that were the case, he would have left long ago. He came because he still sees some potential here. He then hands the young man a mysterious object with a red stone. He says that, if used correctly, it can easily erase the humiliation he suffered, but that there will be a price. Confused, Leonard asks why he's receiving this. The red-haired man replies that it would be a waste to let a promising talent give up so easily, but he warns, not just anyone can use that artifact. If someone unprepared tries to wield it, they'll be consumed by the flames before they ever access its power. With a dark look, the Crimson Lord states that if Leonard endures it, this will become an opportunity. If not, it will simply be the spark that speeds up his own downfall. The choice is his. Leonard recalls that this was supposed to be the beginning of his rise, the moment he would reach the top. Without hesitation, he accepts the offer. Far from there, a dormitory still has its lights on. Inside the room, Dale trains in silence, shaping his aura with focus. As he works, he reflects that Euless didn't bring him here just to deal with those brats. The academy students are a joke compared to what he's faced before. The Marquis is after something much bigger. Suddenly, someone knocks at the door calling his name. Dale recognizes Cephia's voice and goes to open it without delay. Seeing her smile, he invites the master inside. Sometime later, the two are inside the room and the silence between them becomes slightly awkward. Trying to break the tension, Dale thanks her for accompanying him to the capital. Sophia smiles warmly, watching her student, and asks how the academy classes are going. He replies that they don't come close to hers, and a moment later, a faint blush crosses his face. The mage says she saw his expression that day, full of resentment, as he lost his knights. She apologizes for that. Surprised, Dale immediately asks her not to blame herself. He says that from the very beginning, she was the one who protected him, and that the blame for losing the swordsman was his alone. Cephia gently takes his hand and shakes her head. With a soft smile, she reminds him that she promised to be by his side from the start. But that promise wasn't only about protecting him. She also doesn't want to see him sad. The elf pulls him into a tight embrace. She admits she doesn't fully understand why someone so young carries such an empty look in his eyes, but she makes clear that it doesn't matter. She will stay by his side no matter what happens. Dale returns the embrace and thanks his teacher. A few days pass. The scene returns to the Red Magic Tower. The graduation exam is approaching, and a new duel is about to begin, this time between Dale and Valhor. Suddenly, Leonard appears and asks everyone to wait. His expression is heavy with irritation. The professor steps forward and warns that class has already started, and that if there's another disruption, he won't be able to step in this time. With contempt, Leonard questions when the man has ever been useful, and walks past him with a dismissive scoff. Already channeling his fire current, the blonde declares that he came to end things. He demands a duel, once and for all, to decide who is truly the strongest talent in the Empire. Before anyone can make sense of what's happening, the battle erupts. erupts. Explosions ring out across the room one after another. Leonard charges forward without restraint, attacking relentlessly. He spins the fire chain through the air and throws strike after strike. Even under that pressure, his opponent manages to dodge everything. The blonde taunts him, asking where all that arrogance went. So far, the other has done nothing but run. Mid-attack, Leonard declares that he's finally getting used to this power, and that now he'll be able to go far beyond because the greatest talent in the Empire is him. What he's using is called overclock, a technique that forces the magic circle to spin past its natural limits. The ruby crystal bracelet is what's driving the mana overload, and it's clear Leonard had been hiding it specifically to use in this duel. The problem is obvious. His body was never built to handle that. If he loses control, he'll be consumed by his own energy. Even so, Leonard asks if his opponent really believes he has the right to call himself the best, and declares that this time, he'll be the one to make the other suffer. The fire chain comes down hard, but the young man blocks the strike with his sword. The explosions around them start to frighten the students, and the teacher, in a panic, orders an immediate evacuation. The fight keeps going at full intensity. Dale dodges the attacks, but ends up getting grazed across the face. Eyes burning, Leonard taunts him again, says the feeling is disappointing, that his rival isn't fighting, just running. Asks why he doesn't just release that world he brags so much about. Dale answers with an unsettling calm. He doesn't need it to deal with him. He shifts his grip on the sword and lands a precise strike. The blade cuts the fire chain clean in two. Leonard watches, stunned, as his weapon is destroyed. The young man says there's still time to give up and asks him to throw away the artifact. That pain can't be easy to bear. The object might destroy his body before any victory comes. There's no point in pushing past limits that can't be sustained. At some point, there'll be no coming back. Irritated, Leonard shouts at him to stop talking, asks who Dale thinks he is to decide his limits, and declares that he's had nowhere to go back to for a long time, that he'll make the other feel what he's capable of. After all, he is the greatest genius in the Empire, Leonard Walter. The flames spread across the entire space and consume everything around them. The blonde starts laughing, completely taken over by madness. Between laughs, he claims he's reached the fourth circle, says that Sea of Flames is his own world, and that in there, the one who will die is his opponent. Leonard's mental world begins to manifest, forced out by the artifact. But something is wrong. The projection is unstable, distorted, a reflection of a mind on the edge of collapse. Memories of Leonard's father surface, saying that his success isn't even enough to hold up the Walter family name. The emotions overflow and bleed into the surroundings. That world doesn't reveal power, it reveals despair. In the end, he's nothing but a lost boy. With cold composure, Dale decides to respond. He says he'll show the real mental world the other wanted to see so badly. Dark energy starts building around him, and he asks if Leonard will be able to handle all the rage and emptiness he swallowed throughout his entire life. Without hesitating, he releases a dark and terrifying energy toward the blonde. Leonard's expression shifts from anger to despair. The terrible memories from Dale's past life begin to flash before his eyes, one after another. The visions are so heavy that the blonde drops to the floor, unable to move. Dale steps closer and asks if that wasn't exactly what he wanted, says that's the price to pay for a talent like his, and in a sinister voice, asks if Leonard is willing to pay it. Sometime later, the two return to the room. The blonde starts apologizing for not having recognized Dale. The teacher shows up right at that moment, shaken. The sight of Leonard on his knees is something hard to believe. Dale asks them to take the boy to the hospital. Leonard Walter is unrecognizable, as if he had sunk into a void he couldn't climb out of. And so the incident at the academy came to an end. Leonard requested a leave of absence citing personal reasons, and the rumors didn't take long. People were saying the boy had lost his mind. Sometime later, a storm breaks over another place. Someone shouts about the Walter family bloodline. A man clenches his fist and demands to know how this could have happened. Seated on his throne, he curses Dale of Saxon and his entire family. This is Walter, elder of the Sixth Circle Magic Tower and Count of House Walter. A man approaches, calling out to the Lord, "It's Iullus." In a measured tone, he says he can only imagine how hard it must be to end up humiliated like this, and that he understands perfectly why Walter forgot his own position and showed such hostility toward the boy. Walter denies it immediately, insisting he holds no hostile feelings toward the eldest son of House Saxon. He pleads for there to be no misunderstanding. Iullus explains that he came only to help the great lord get his revenge. In his hands, he carries an artifact. Back at the Red Tower Academy, the sky is already clear. The students comment that the teacher is late. Dale thinks about Leonard, a far weaker opponent than he had expected, but he doubts Iullus will stay still after what happened. Then the classroom door opens, and Dale's eyes go wide. It's Iullus himself. He announces that he'll be taking the teacher's place. Dale hadn't expected the redhead to show up in person, person and starts calculating what that man is planning. Euless starts talking about the history of that place. He mentions that Leonard Walter carried impossibly high expectations, and because of that, everyone around him ended up bowing down, intimidated by the reputation more than by any real talent. The redhead says he knows the rumors about the blonde's downfall well, but if everyone was so shaken by someone with no true talent, then they need to learn to carry themselves better, because now they're under his guidance. Without dwelling on the subject, he gets straight to the point. The topic of the lesson will be history. The announcement catches Dale off guard, and his eyes widen. Euless begins explaining that the Empire's Unification War was a period marked by deaths carried out in the name of a greater justice. During that time, the Black and Red Towers created an unofficial unit, under the guise of academic cooperation, a partnership to maintain balance after the conflict. That unit was called Executor P&V. The name echoes in Dale's mind, making him even more alert. Why was that subject, buried in the shadows, being brought up now? Euless continues. Behind the rhetoric of seeking truth and justice, the unit conducted experiments on prisoners of war, people burned alive, bodies mutilated, stitched back together, and rebuilt over and over. To them, ethics and morality were nothing more than dispensable luxuries. The students are shocked, unable to believe what they're hearing. Euless shows disappointment at their reaction. He states that anyone who wants to become a mage of the Red Tower shouldn't be shaken by such simple moral questions. On the contrary, they should feel proud. Even so, he notices that no one seems comfortable, so he turns his gaze directly toward Dale. He asks if Dale also feels uneasy like the others, if perhaps he would choose morality over reason, and he adds that the Black Duke was no different in the past. Bound by his own morality, Alan abandoned the pursuit of truth. Dale already knows that story. After the war, the Empire tried to keep the unit active, but Alan dissolved it as a last resort, and all records were erased. Euless then declares that, upon seeing Dale, he witnessed the true power of a Black Master, a power far above anyone present in that room. He states that the boy's talent is different, capable of turning him into something beyond human, and that one day he will reach the top of the Black Tower. He then extends his hand toward Dale. He asks if Dale would be willing to seek the truth alongside him, proposing a new alliance between the Black and the Red. Dale understands immediately. The redhead wants to revive the Executor using his talent. The boy stands up and politely says he appreciates the proposal, but that decisions like this require order. His father is still present and in good health, so they cannot discuss the future while ignoring his authority. Euless dismisses the concern with a simple snap of his fingers. The environment transforms completely. The room disappears, giving way to a dark and strange space. Dale's eyes go wide. At first glance, it looks like snow falling all around, but looking more carefully, he sees the truth. Those aren't snowflakes. They're ashes drifting through the air. This scene isn't unfamiliar to him. Old memories begin to surface. Euless approaches slowly and asks if Dale doesn't find that world magnificent. He explains that only the boy can see it. The other students don't perceive anything at all. He describes the place with pride. Enormous steel towers, impossible to replicate anywhere else. Iron-black dragons crossing the skies, capable of unleashing flames beyond any imagination. Suddenly, something cuts across the sky above them. A flying machine appears and launches a missile directly toward the two of them. The projectile drops. It's a bomb. An instant later, a colossal explosion swallows everything around them. With a look of pure pleasure, Euless asks Dale to take in that empire of fire and steel, capable of subjugating even titans. To him, that represents the true pinnacle that mages desperately try to reach. Dale asks if he tried to summon a hero from another world in pursuit of that truth. Euless replies that he was almost right. He says the individual summoned did have some use as a soldier, but was unable to grasp the true magnitude of that power. At that, the boy laughs. In his thoughts, he realizes the redhead is ignorant. All of that truth has already been inherited by him. Euless's gaze fixes on Dale. He states that is exactly why he brought him there. Dale asks if he wants to reach that power through a new alliance between the Black and the Red. The man confirms without hesitation. He then tells the boy he can take all the time he needs to think it over. After all, to him, time is nothing more than something insignificant. The redhead begins to prepare to close the moment, but adds one more detail before doing so. He explains that the head of House Walter is resentful, and that his son's humiliation will not be forgotten. On top of that, Walter was one of the leaders of the old Executor, and the Emperor prefers that the secrets of that unit remain hidden. Euless makes it clear that all of this is nothing more than a negotiation. Even if Dale refuses the proposal and enters into conflict with House Walter, he can still walk away free. But if he chooses to eliminate the problem, Euless guarantees there will be a fitting reward. With an enigmatic smile, he announces the end of the lesson. He snaps his fingers, and the world around them dissolves. In an instant, everything returns to normal. The two are back in the classroom as if nothing had happened. Turning to leave, Euless says he looks forward to seeing him again, and that soon, Dale's actions will speak for themselves. That same night, on the outskirts of the imperial capital at the Black Duke's estate, Dale trains alone. With his eyes closed, he concentrates deeply, adjusting his aura. The vision of the city reduced to ashes still echoes in his mind. He realizes that, by mentioning the hero from another world, Euless was sending a warning. If the boy refused, he could be next. But Dale decides he will not let anyone use him again. Suddenly, a loud crash breaks his concentration. An explosion hits the roof of the residence. He quickly puts on his cloak. It's clear that someone has arrived. Cephia runs toward him, calling his name with concern. Another explosion echoes inside the house. Then a figure emerges from the rubble. It's Walter. The man stares Dale down and says he thought he would run, but was pleased to find him there. With a cold voice, he demands to know how the boy dared to ruin his son's life like that, and he makes it clear that Dale will now face the consequences.